Chapter 240. After the death of Handian Rabi II, no one knew who would be in control of the kingdom. But Prince Binut clearly had the upper hand. If Princess Sisela was smart, she would have chosen to cooperate with him to protect herself. But the situation changed too quickly. The Assyrian army suddenly invaded, and the kingdom of Babylon was routed. The 6 city-states that were ceded to the kingdom of Babylon were also under the princess's control, including her fiefdom. This was a devastating blow to the kingdom. Although Prince Binut was defeated, he managed to gain control of the kingdom's army during the process of resisting the foreign enemies. He had now become the pillar of the kingdom. But that was not the end of the disaster. Sinek arrogantly ordered the kingdom of Babylon to marry her. With the princess's intelligence, how could she not know what the ambitious emperor was up to, and what kind of fate awaited her? As long as she married Sinek, the Assyrian Empire would definitely support her ascension to the throne. Once she became the queen of Babylon, she would either be completely under Seneka's control, or he would force her to hand over the throne. This time, she was really kidnapped, and in such a noble and world-famous way. So she was singing alone. But her singing was interrupted by footsteps. The supreme mage who had been following her all this while, Perry, came in without announcing his arrival. Princess Sisela turned around and asked, "What's the matter, Paley?" Perry's appearance hadn't changed much. This fair-skinned man with bright red lips still looked so coquettish. He squinted his slender and long eyes and said, "Your Highness, why is your voice so sad?" The princess looked at him. There were no tears in her eyes, not even any expression. She replied in a flat tone, "You must understand my situation." Perry smiled, which made him look even more coquettish. "My beautiful princess, of course I know what you are worried about. I don't think it's a bad thing that Emperor Sinek wants you to marry him. You will eventually have to marry someone. Which famous hero on the continent is worthy of you? Only the invincible Emperor Sinek. With your beauty and wisdom, you won't have to worry about not winning the heart of the Assyrian emperor. If you two get together, you will become the most illustrious monarch on the continent, the most beautiful woman and hero in history." Princess Sisela was still expressionless. "Paley, I didn't expect you to be a lobbyist." Perry shook her head. "Your Highness, I'm thinking for your sake. This concerns not only the fates of countless people, but also your own. The Prime Minister of Assyria, Alpha, has sent a secret letter, promising that as long as you marry the Assyrian emperor, the Assyrian Empire will fully support you in ascending to the throne. From then on, there will be eternal peace, and both countries will be happy." Princess Sisela raised her voice. "Peace?" Perry lowered her head and said, "Your Highness, please calm down. You and your wife will rule Assyria and Babylon like a family. This is also a way to achieve peace." Princess Sisela finally showed her anger. The people of Babylon contributed food and resources, while the Assyrians became the conquerors. Is this your so-called peace? Not to mention that brutal massacre. Perry maintained her smile. "If you marry the Assyrian emperor and become the queen of Babylon, there will naturally be no more massacres in the kingdom. Your Royal Highness, I have been following you for many years. You have long had the desire to become a queen, and now is the best time to do so. Because of this failed war, Prince Vonnegut took control of this declining kingdom. Only by relying on the strength of the Assyrian Empire can you ascend to the throne. As for what to do after that, I believe there is still a chance." The anger on Princess Sisela's face gradually faded. She asked with an expressionless face, "Are you suggesting that I feign civility with Sinek and marry him first?" Perry nodded. "That's not a bad idea. It's the best choice for you and the kingdom." Princess Sisela waved her hand tiredly. "I understand what you mean. You may leave." Perry bowed. "Your Highness, please take care of yourself. I will be on guard nearby. If anything happens, I will be there at your beck and call." After Perry left, Princess Sisela looked at the empty house, and couldn't help but wipe away the tears at the corner of her eyes. She looked so pitiful and helpless. She realized that she was being watched. Her private house had been surrounded by detection magic arrays, and the one who was watching her turned out to be Perry, the supreme mage who had been following her and looking forward to her ascension to the throne. Perry might be trying to protect her, afraid that something bad would happen to her. Or there might be other reasons. She knew the methods of this supreme mage. When she planned the kidnapping case of the Highlanders, the plot to frame Prince Vonnegut was also part of Perry's plan. Seneca's desire to control the entire Babylon kingdom was a disaster for many, but it was also an opportunity for others. A cruel king who wanted to control his great empire needed a group of nobles who understood the kingdom well to exercise his power. Perry followed Princess Sisela for this purpose, and now Seneca could give it to him. Perry came to the front yard of the princess's house. There was another person waiting for him in the side hall. It was Kane, whom Amon had taught before. When Kane saw Perry, he stood up and asked, "What's the situation? Has Her Highness made up her mind?" Perry sighed softly. "Her Highness is still a little worried. But don't worry, I've set up a detection magic formation to keep a close eye on her. I won't give her the chance to make a wrong decision." Kane's voice trembled. "I want to remind you of another thing. Someone from Prince Vonnegut's side has proposed to assassinate Princess Sisela. The princess would rather kill herself than submit to Seneca." Perry's facial muscles twitched involuntarily. "I can think of someone who might do that. Have you found out who Prince Vonnegut is going to send and when?" Kane replied, "Prince Vonnegut is still hesitating, but sooner or later, some of his men will lose their patience. I'll inform you as soon as I have any news and help you protect the princess. It's best if you can take the opportunity to eradicate those people. Don't forget the Assyrian Empire's promise to us. Nothing must go wrong." Perry said bitterly, "Those people are trying to assassinate Princess Sisela and use her death to make a fuss. But we can also use the fact that Princess Sisela is married to Emperor Seneca to promote her virtue. She is doing this for the people of Babylon. Naturally, there will be warriors who will follow the princess and protect her. We can also use the hearts of the people to our advantage." Kane added, "There will be warriors from the kingdom coming to protect and escort the princess. But you must be careful not to let any assassins sneak in." "Of course I know that. I've been serving the princess for many years. I know who is trustworthy. They don't think like you. They really want to protect the princess. They believe that the princess is marrying Seneca for the sake of Babylon. They don't think like you." This made Kane a little embarrassed, but he didn't want to show his dissatisfaction. After a few more words, he hurriedly left the princess's mansion. Perhaps Amon did not expect that Kane, whom he had instructed to obtain a high position in the kingdom, would be bribed by the Assyrian Empire and become Seneca's helper. The prime minister of the Assur Empire, Alpha, had once sent a messenger to promise Kane that if the Assur Empire gained complete control over the kingdom of Babylon, Kane, the high priest, would enjoy unprecedented power and status. Alpha made the same promise to Perry. Kane left Princess Sisela's mansion, crossed half of the city and entered a brothel in Babylon City. His men in disguise were already waiting at the door. He was waiting for someone in a small parlor. Not long after, one of his men reported to him that a guest had arrived. When the door opened, it was Prince Benut's confidant, Gakate, who was also Prince Benut's teacher at the Academy of Magic. When Amon and Madanzo first met Gakate in Arcade, he was only a 6th-level mage. Now he was already an 8th-level mage. With the rise of Prince Benut's status, Gakate had also become an important figure in Babylon. This was an era of chaos. There were all kinds of conflicts and opportunities on the continent, but at the same time, it was also an era of great talents. According to a rough calculation, the number of supreme achievers in the last 10 years was more than the number in the past few decades. It was as if these hidden geniuses had found a stage to shine in this chaotic world. Kane lowered his voice as soon as he saw Gakate. "Has His Highness made up his mind?" Gakate sighed. "Princess Sisela is innocent. There are still many warriors in the kingdom who support her." Under the pressure of the Assyrian Empire, His Majesty the King had no choice but to agree to the marriage. But His Majesty also told Prince Benut to deal with the matter himself. But His Highness still couldn't bear to get rid of this aunt who is younger than him. Kane said anxiously, "How can a man of great ambition be so soft-hearted? If Princess Sisela really marries Seneca, the fate of Prince Benut and the entire kingdom will be buried in her hands. Besides, His Highness knows very well that Princess Sisela tried to frame him." Gakate sighed again. "That's what I told His Highness. As far as I know, Princess Sisela tried to frame His Highness more than once. Once, she claimed that she was assassinated and tried to link the mastermind behind the assassination to His Highness. But in the end, it was His Majesty the King who suppressed the matter. Cain reminded him, His Highness might be hesitating because he doesn't want to be accused of assassinating Princess Sisela. But you and I should know how to share the burden of the kingdom. Gecate nodded. That's right. That's why I'm here to discuss this matter with you. We'll do it ourselves. When it's done, I'll ask for forgiveness from the king in private. Cain frowned. This matter must not be made public. Do you have a plan? Gecate nodded again. I've come up with a complete plan. The first step is to assassinate Princess Sisela, claiming that she killed herself in order to resist the cruel cynic. This will ignite the anger and fighting spirit of all the factions in the kingdom. The second step is for His Highness Binut to rise to the throne and rally the hearts of the people. The third step is to persuade King Hammurabi II to abdicate, so that His Highness Binut can ascend to the throne. Only then will the kingdom have a new hope. Cain nodded silently. After a while he said, If we succeed in the first step, Prince Binut will have no choice but to act according to the plan. But first we must make sure that nothing goes wrong in the first step. It's not easy to make a move in the capital. The best place to do it is when Princess Sisela is on her way to Assur. Inform me as soon as you're ready. Remember, don't leak anything. Gecate took his leave. Cain sat there staring at his slender fingers, deep in thought. This supreme mage was actually discussing with Perry and Gecate about protecting and assassinating Princess Sisela. It was hard to tell which side he was on. Perhaps he was weighing which side he would get the most out of. It seemed that Perry's envoy had arrived at Enril. Although the city was in a state of war, Perry had requested to exchange prisoners of war. This was also a signal. Neither side was able to start a large-scale battle at the moment. Otherwise, it would only result in a lose-lose situation. Exchanging prisoners of war was the wisest move. The document was delivered to Faust. Faust looked at it for a long time without saying anything. He agreed to the request to withdraw from Lung City and wrote a letter in reply to the messenger, confirming the time, place, number of people, and the number of concubines to be exchanged. According to past practice, exchanging prisoners of war was a signal to end the war. Enril had also responded affirmatively, indicating that this lose-lose war was over. But Faust knew very well that this was only a temporary calm. The real storm was yet to come. Emperor Cynic, who had already occupied 6 city-states of the Kingdom of Babylon, would never be willing to accept the defeat in the plains of Duk. The small withdrawal of Lung would not stop his lofty ambitions. It was estimated that it would not be long before new orders, and a large number of reinforcements arrived. The price of crossing the Saya Plateau to launch an expedition was huge, but the cruel Cynic did not care about such a price. Cynica's strategy was brutal, but it seemed to be very effective. He wanted to recoup the losses of the war from the enemy. The fiercer the resistance of the city, the more tragic the massacre after being conquered. The land would be occupied, the wealth would be plundered, and the people who survived would be enslaved. Faust could already see the scene of corpses strewn across the land. The narrow and winding path through the Saya Plateau and the fertile plains of Duk would be littered with bones. The document sent by Perry's envoy was personally written by Goliath. Faust recognized it at a glance, and also understood the code words in the document. He knew that Goliath wanted to meet him, and he probably knew what Goliath wanted to talk to him about. Faust pondered for a few days by himself, and finally decided to take the letter to Samir. If there was one person in this world that the sage could not bear to part with, then it was this Assyrian queen. Faust did not trust Samir as much as he trusted Goliath. He did not know how Samir would view this matter, but he did not want to hide it from her. Faust frankly told Samir that Goliath wanted to meet him, and he was ready to go. Samir was silent for a long time, staring at Faust with a scrutinizing gaze, as if trying to see through this sage. Finally he asked, "Are you not afraid that this is a trap?" Faust shook his head. "I trust Goliath. Since he has already made a promise, he will not take advantage of this opportunity to ambush me. In this world, people are not the same, and Goliath is precisely this kind of person." Samir asked again, I can imagine what he will talk to you about, but why are you telling me? Right now in Enrol, no one can restrict your movements or ask about your whereabouts. Faust had a moment of impulse to say something, but in the end he just lowered his head and said, "Look at my heart. I cannot hide it from you. In Enrol, my fate is one with yours. No matter what risky decision I make, I must tell you." Samir withdrew her scrutinizing gaze and looked out the window. Even if Goliath is trustworthy, there is no guarantee that the others in Lung will not take advantage of this opportunity to make a move. If we lose you, it will be a disaster for Enrol and even the Assyrian Empire, so I have decided to go with you. Faust hurriedly stood up and waved his hands. No, Your Majesty, you must not take this risk. I am telling you this because I want you to know that if something unexpected happens, you can strengthen your defenses. Samir smiled faintly. Esteemed sage, if you are not afraid of taking this risk, do you think that I am? Faust's face turned red and shook her head. No, I do not dare to doubt your courage. It is just that you are the Assyrian Empress. It is not worth it to do this. Samir suddenly sighed and said in a commanding tone, Then what else in this world is worth it for me to do? Since you know that I am the Empress, then this is an order. I have decided to go with you, and only to protect your safety. I will not eavesdrop on your conversation with Goliath. You said that you do not want me to take risks, but what else in this world is more dangerous than being in the middle of a battle? I have already appeared on the battlefield. Why can't I accompany you to such an appointment? Faust took a step back and lowered her head. That is the order of the Assyrian Emperor. I do not want to see you personally charge into the battlefield. He has an empress like you, but he does not know how to cherish you. Samir gave Faust a meaningful look and changed the topic. The place where you will meet is in the mountains of the Euphrates Valley. That place is 200 miles away from both Lung and Enrol. It is impossible to mobilize the army deep in the mountains, and if there is any movement in Lung, it will not be able to hide from us. Even if it is an ambush by an expert, we can still escape. It is settled then. Go back and prepare. Faust excused himself, but when he reached the door he asked, Your Majesty, what do you think of the latest news? Samir asked with an expressionless face. What news? Faust bit the bullet and said, His Majesty Cynic is going to marry Princess Sisela of the Kingdom of Babylon. Chapter 241. The agreed meeting time was in the morning, and in the latter half of the night, Hammer and Faust stealthily jumped off the city wall and headed east towards the mountains of the Euphrates Valley. In today's complicated situation, not only were there great men attacking and defending each other on the plains of Duk, there were also gods quietly watching this place. They did not fly, but walked quietly in the wilderness, leaving the plains and entering deep into the mountains. The Euphrates Valley was located to the east of the plains of Duk. It was not as majestic and desolate as the Saya Plateau in the north, nor was it as vast and flat as the plains in the south. The mountains were steep and filled with ravines, and the valleys were lush with vegetation. From afar, one could see towering peaks. It was difficult for ordinary people to pass through, and it was also the best place to hide one's tracks. Naturally, Goliath had set the rendezvous here for the sake of secrecy. Faust and Samir arrived at the designated place at dawn, and at a glance, they could see that Goliath had made arrangements in advance to reassure both parties. It was an independent hill, surrounded by peaks that were far away, and the view from the top was very wide. This place was both hidden and able to detect movements in the distance at any time. There was a table and 2 chairs on the top of the hill, and Goliath was already sitting there waiting. The sun had not yet risen to the top of the distant peaks, and the morning mist was drifting in the valley. Dew hung on the wet grass, and the surroundings were so quiet that only the sound of birds could be heard in the distance. Halfway up the hill, there was a man standing there casually with his arms crossed, without any weapons. In the morning mist, there was an indescribable aura about him. It was Gilgamesh, the hero who had shocked the continent a few years ago. Samir stopped halfway up the hill, and without greeting Gilgamesh, he stood at a distance, facing Gilgamesh, and watched Faust walk up to the top of the hill. Goliath knew that Faust had arrived, but he did not turn around and stand up to greet him. Instead, he filled the cup on the opposite side of his seat with wine, and then he chanted softly, "Your swaying figure is gradually approaching. The once blurry image has appeared before my eyes. Is your heart still yearning for the dream of the past? The dream rises and floats in the morning mist. The breath of youth ripples in your chest. Unable to calm down, looking back at the scene of the past, could it be that the beautiful legend has disappeared?" Faust quietly sat across from Goliath and began to chant. Who is it that murmurs softly, the faintly discernible melody in the morning mist? Let the wine cup touch the lips, listen to the dawn's voice. Does it announce another beginning? Who can I still sing leisurely with, in this remote wilderness, under whose gaze, who is singing a song of consolation to form a new alliance? Their voices reached Gilgamesh and Samir's ears at the same time. They did not hide the content of their conversation. Faust wanted to take this opportunity to let Samir hear the conversation between him and Goliath. As for Samir's reaction, it would depend on the queen herself. Goliath raised his cup and asked Faust with a smile, "How long has it been since we last met?" Faust raised his cup in greeting. "From the last time we met until now, it has been a full 10 years. I wish you well, old man." Goliath said, "Thank you for your greeting. You are really young and promising. You broke through the 9th level before me. So I should congratulate you, sage imperial preceptor." Faust lowered his head and said, "I am ashamed. How dare I call myself promising in front of you?" Goliath asked again, "I am very happy that you can come. At least it shows that you are still willing to trust me. Although we are enemies on the battlefield, there is no barrier between us personally. Do you know what I want to talk about?" Faust replied, "Do you want to talk about the latest situation in the Assyrian Empire and the continent?" Goliath shook his head. "No, the most important thing is not these. I just want to talk about your path and your choice. I have known you for a long time. You thirsted for the knowledge of this world, hoping to solve all problems, and change the fate of the kingdom and the world around you. Under your many years of planning, the Assyrian Empire is now strong and prosperous. Should I congratulate you for getting what you want?" Faust did not answer, but began to drink. He drank very slowly, his lips touching the rim of the cup as he slowly sipped. Only after finishing the full cup did he put down the cup and said, "Why do you have to laugh at me? If you have something to say, just say it." Goliath looked straight into Faust's eyes and asked, "Then answer me directly. Is this what you want to see today? Is it the world of your dreams?" Faust inadvertently glanced at Samir's ethereal figure, and replied in a low but clear voice, "No, the Assyrian Empire today is not what I want to see." Goliath continued to ask unhurriedly, "Then can you tell me? What kind of Assyrian Empire do you want to see? There is no need to make assumptions about what has already happened. Let's start from the present, and see if it can be done in reality. If you are willing, just say what you think in your heart." Ammon was not at the scene of the meeting between Goliath and Faust. He was a dozen miles away on a high mountain shrouded in rain clouds, watching the movements here. The vast valley was under his surveillance. On the table between Goliath and Faust was a death chaser lamp, on which Ammon had temporarily attached himself to an avatar. Like a statue of Ammon, he could hear the conversation between the two, and could even clearly sense the subtle emotional changes in the tone of the two. Goliath placed the death chaser lamp on the table without any concealment. Faust, of course, recognized this magical device and knew that it could be used as the control center of a detection magic formation. When the two were talking, they naturally had to constantly pay attention to the movements around them, but Faust did not expect that Ammon could use such a method to listen in from far away, as if he was sitting right next to him. This was a method that only a god could use. Ammon was monitoring the movements in the valley between the mountains, but he suddenly felt a little tightness on his back, as if he was also being watched. He was already a god, and his physical and mental senses were unfathomable. He could experience the slightest changes in everything in the world. So why would he suddenly have such a feeling? He did not need to turn his head to see clearly. There was indeed a person coming, stepping out of the void and appearing not far behind him. He did not sense any nervousness or hostility from this person, but the powerful aura permeated the mountain peak, imperceptibly making it difficult for Ammon to even turn around. Ammon slowly turned around without batting an eyelid to face the person, and asked in a deep voice, Marduk. The one who stepped out of the void was another god. Like Ammon, he had once explored and comprehended the power of origin on his own without the guidance of a divine clan, and reached the realm of transcendence and eternal life. Now he was in existence even more powerful than Ammon, and also one of the two main gods of the Anunnaki divine clan, Marduk, who was worshipped by the kingdom of Babylon. Marduk had recently been steadily defeated by Enlil's offensive, and the kingdom of Babylon was also in a precarious situation. Looking at the current situation, in the near future, Enlil would reunite the entire Anunnaki divine realm, and Marduk's defeat was irreversible. But at this moment, seeing this god, he did not have the slightest look of a loser, and even seemed to be glowing. Marduk looked very young, with a stalwart figure that was unusually fit, and the armor he wore was engraved with exquisite floral patterns, revealing the lines of the muscles of his arms and calves that were so masculine and powerful. Ammon was already very tall, but Marduk's figure was half a head taller than Ammon, with a high nose, deep eye sockets, thick lips, and angular facial features, like a handsome warrior. Seeing Ammon turn around to speak, Marduk showed a dignified smile. Yes, I am Marduk. Congratulations, my friend, among the blessed gods. You and I should have more in common, because we have both had the same experience. I still remember when you were fighting against the Uruk army at the Kemet defensive line. You called out my name in public and challenged me. I admire your courage. Ammon smiled faintly. Yes, I once said on the battlefield, invite Marduk, and then took back that sentence. Everyone has their moments of youth and frivolity, and arrogance often stems from ignorance, so the current me will not challenge you. Marduk smiled and shook his head. Don't be nervous, I was just joking. You must be surprised that I suddenly appeared here, right? Ammon replied frankly. To be honest, it's not too surprising. I knew you would appear sooner or later, but I just didn't know when and where it would be. May I ask what you have come to me for? Marduk looked at Ammon with great interest for a long time, but did not seem to see any flaws, and said with a smile, Ammon, I'm here to offer you help. I heard that you are in a very bad situation after becoming a god. Ammon grinned. Thank you for your kindness, but you seem to have more troubles than I do now. Marduk let out a cold snort of contempt. My troubles? Are you trying to say Enlil? Ammon shrugged. Isn't that so? The kingdom of Babylon has submitted to the Assyrian Empire, and as the main god, you should be aware of what has happened recently, right? Cynic is trying to take complete control of the kingdom of Babylon, and if that is the case, you will lose your divine realm and your position as the main god. I really didn't expect you to still look so pleased with yourself. Marduk curled his lips. So what if that's the case? Do you want me to hide in the divine realm and cry like a bullied wife? Enlil can win on earth, but he can't hurt me. If I told you that I don't care about the position of the main god of the kingdom of Babylon, would you believe it? Ammon shook his head and said, It doesn't matter whether I believe it or not. It's up to you whether you care or not. You didn't show up today just to talk to me about this, did you? If you want me to join the Anunnaki, I have already refused. Marduk waved his hand and said, No. Joining the Anunnaki is not a very good choice for you. And if I were you, I wouldn't agree either. In fact, I wanted to talk to you a long time ago, but at that time you were not qualified to talk to me about any cooperation. As for today, the situation has changed. Ammon narrowed his eyes and said, Oh, so you were also waiting for me to become a god? In that case, why did you send an oracle to stop my people from returning to their homeland? Marduk smiled indifferently in the face of Ammon's questioning. The gods have their own thoughts, especially a god like me. No god wants the miners of Duk to return there, unless they believe in themselves. I just made my agreement, and in fact they have gone back. Unfortunately, Ammonius, your people don't believe in you either. I don't even know what kind of dream they made up, believing in something that doesn't exist. Ammon interrupted him. That's their own choice, it has nothing to do with you, and your oracle did not stop them from returning to their homeland after all. Today you want to talk about cooperation with me, and who do you want to deal with? Marduk sat on a rock and waved his hand to the west. Is there a need to ask? Of course it's Enlil. We have a common enemy, and we can sit down and have a good talk." Amon also sat down and asked with a frown, "Didn't you just say that it doesn't matter? Why do you want me to help you deal with him?" Marduk's expression was very profound. "It's not you helping me, but we helping each other. In terms of strength, it's more me helping you. I don't care what victory Enril has won. But that doesn't mean I will forgive him, and Enril will never let you go, just like Cynic will never let Talon go. Instead of waiting for them to come to us, why don't we discuss how to get rid of them now?" Marduk was perhaps the most optimistic person Amon had ever met. He seemed to be indifferent to the war on Earth, and even though Enril had the upper hand in the war for the Divine Realm, he still had an indifferent attitude. And he knew that Amon wanted to get rid of Cynic and support a new ruler in the Assyrian Empire, change its cruel state policy, and destroy this war chariot of militarism. Marduk came to Amon with another proposal for cooperation, to get rid of Enril. His tone was so casual, as if the name Enril was just an ordinary code name, no different from a cat or dog, and not the other main god of the Anunnaki who had already forced him to retreat. His idea could not be said to be unreasonable. No matter how much trouble Enril made on Earth, no matter what kind of victory Assyria and Hittite achieved against the kingdom of Babylon, if the god himself fell, then the desire to unify the Anunnaki would be nothing more than a futile effort. In the eyes of Amon, the same was true of Seneca's ambition for supremacy. But it was easier said than done to get rid of Enril. The process of this god unifying the Anunnaki divine realm was not just for the sake of vanity, but it did indeed give him greater power. What's more, Enril was astute and had the achievements of the Creator. As long as he did not make a mistake and court death himself, there was almost no possibility of him falling. Just like Marduk, although he had been forced to retreat by Enril, it was difficult for Enril to have the opportunity to kill the god himself, and the result was nothing more than another agreement. But Marduk also told Amon that according to the oath of the gods of the same divine clan, if Amon took the initiative to challenge Enril, neither Marduk nor Murin could help. But the situation was not necessarily the other way around. If it was Enril who took the initiative to challenge Amon, others could intervene to help Amon. With Enril's cunning, if he really decided to attack Amon, he would not give him a chance to find help. Fights between gods with the purpose of destroying the other side were often very tragic. Enril did not seem to have any intention of doing so at the moment. He only needed to win on Earth to force Amon and Marduk to the point where they had no place to stand, and he did not need to do anything himself. But there was one situation that Enril absolutely could not tolerate, and that was if Amon sent someone to assassinate Cynic, completely destroying Enril's plan to unify the divine realm of the Anunnaki divine clan. At that time, Enril would feel that leaving Amon behind was his biggest mistake. And if Amon was unfortunately alone and gave him an opportunity to take advantage of, Enril would definitely make a move. After listening to this, Amon smiled bitterly and said, "Great God Marduk, I understand what you mean. You want me to be the bait to catch the big fish Enril, but why should I take this risk to help you? As a way of solving problems between gods, what kind of agreement should we have?" Marduk's expression was full of confidence, as if he was not worried at all that Amon would refuse, and said unhurriedly, "Of course you will be willing to cooperate with me. The reason is very simple. You and Enril have a grudge, and it is impossible for you to compromise with him, and he will never let you go. Enril just wants to find out more about you first and wait for the best time to get rid of you. So you should find an opportunity to show your strength, and there is no need to hide anything, because you are no match for him. Under certain circumstances, Enril will definitely make a move as soon as possible, because he will feel that if he continues to keep you around, you will be a bigger and bigger disaster, and the threat you pose will even surpass mine." Amon asked, "Under what circumstances?" Marduk stretched out his hand and pointed to the small hill in the middle of the mountains. "That is Goliath and Faust, right? One is the chief honorary elder of the Academy of Magic, the highest priest of Hittite, and the other is the irreplaceable chief high priest of the Assyrian Empire, the sage of the nation. The reason why the domain of the source of divine power is because of the faith of the people. I think that Goliath has probably turned his back on the worship of Enril. If Faust agrees to get rid of Emperor Cynic and destroy Enril's plan under your persuasion, It will also mean that he has turned his back on the main god that the kingdom believes in. The leaders who are supposed to call on the people to believe in the gods on earth have turned their backs on the gods. Do you think such gods are winners or losers? That would be an extremely dangerous signal. And even if Enlil nominally unified the divine realm, I am afraid it would mean that he is losing the true source of divine power. The source of all this is because of your appearance. If you were a mortal, it would be fine, and it would not take long for you to die, but you are already a god who has transcended eternal life, so you must be dealt with as soon as possible. Chapter 242. Martydon replied. Yes, I am asking you to be the bait to lure Enlil into making a move, which is a great risk for you. If you have any requests, feel free to state them. Amon thought for a moment and said, First, you can't attack me, you can't take the opportunity to get rid of me as well, including your divine emissaries. Second, the people of Denlenburg have their own gods, and you can't force them to change their beliefs like you did before, nor can you interfere with their election. Marduk laughed. There is no problem with the first condition, and it is perfectly normal for you to make such a request. As for the second condition, I can also promise you that even if my believers occupy the entire continent, I will not interfere with the beliefs of Denlenburg. But I want to remind you of one thing. People believe in gods not because they are born to believe, but because they can get spiritual comfort from the gods, or because they can fulfill their desires in the name of the gods. Things change, people's hearts change, and the descendants of Denlenburg will also make different choices, and when that time comes you will probably be looking at your own statue. This is not a violation of the agreement. Amon nodded and said, Okay, it's a deal. When everything is ready, how should I notify you? Marduk replied, You are also a god, and you should know that there are many shrines of Marbuks in the world that can summon me. Amon shook his head and said, If Enlil wanted to kill me, he would not have given me the chance to summon you. Marduk chuckled and reached out into the air, as if grabbing something in the void, which condensed into a blood-red stone. He handed the stone to Amon and said, This is the blood I shed in the test to become a god. Crush it with your magic power at the right time, and I will naturally appear. Remember, when using magic power, please call my name Wuxia. Amon took the blood-red stone, and was slightly startled. Wuxia. Marduk stood up and said with his head held high, This is my other name, I have many names in the world, please do not reveal it to anyone. After saying that, he turned and stepped into the void. Amon shouted from behind, I'll tell you my plan in advance, little. Then, he would crush the stone at the most appropriate time. But you should provide another kind of assistance. How can I get rid of Sinak? Marduk's voice came over. That's your business, deal with it yourself. But I can give you 2 small hints. He left confidently, but left a message imprinted into Amon's soul, saying 2 small matters. First of all, the origin of Queen Samir of Asur was actually related to the mermaid king that Amat had guided during the battle of the gods of the Anunnaki. The name of the seductress king was Siren, and he disappeared after the War of the Gods. Neither Giraffe nor Yugala knew where he went, but Marduk and Enlil found out his whereabouts later. The Mermaid King was a kind of mutated siren from the depths of the ocean, and Amon had seen Sylvia's summoned beast Rulio, who was a mermaid king and had developed intelligence and cultivated successfully. Back then, the siren of the Mermaid King came to the continent in this way, but he was luckier than Rulio, accepting the guidance of Amat, and becoming a powerful divine emissary of the Ennead. In the Battle of the Gods, the siren was badly injured, and after his escape, it was finally difficult to treat, so he made a choice. To give up his body in this life and start anew with his spiritual imprint. When Batet made the choice again, he still went to be a cat, but the siren became a human, born in the northern city of the kingdom of Asur. On Earth, a newborn baby grew up and gradually awakened the imprint of his soul. Recultivating the power of the origin in the new life was naturally much faster than that of the siren, but it did not mean that he would be able to achieve the same results. There are many experiences, trials, and opportunities in life that may never come again. And the newborn siren finally reached the end of his life. He may have overlooked one thing. The life of a human was much shorter than that of a siren. His experience and validation on the path of cultivation in the past may not be suitable for this short period of 100 years. Before he had time to pass the test of endless arising and ceasing cycle, his life would come to an end. At this time, Enroll discovered his whereabouts. When the siren came to the end of his life, he made a decision. He would not be reborn with his former spiritual imprint, but would leave completely. He dispersed all of his power, including his new memories, just to do one thing before his death. To leave a certain imprint in the souls of his direct descendants, to be passed down from generation to generation until one day, someone could awaken it. The siren disappeared, but he left behind descendants, and they spread out to form a tribe in the northern part of Assur. The spiritual imprint containing the power to guide them would always be passed down in the soul of a certain tribe from generation to generation. So far, the last one was Samir. Samir was now a 9th-level supreme warrior, but Aman noticed that she could use magic. Although she did not directly use high-level magic, she used her power very well, very much like an oracle who focused on combat. Samir should have awakened the imprint in her soul, and received the power to guide her. And then the imprint disappeared. Shortly after the death of her ex-husband, the imperial general, Sinek wanted to marry her. She could either marry the king or watch her people be destroyed. This was the choice Sinek gave her, and Enroll told Sinek about Samir's origin in the oracle. Samir was forced to agree to marry Sinek, and there was an agreement. She could not hurt the king, and the king could not hurt her people. This was the truth about Samir's origin and her marriage to the king. Marduk told Aman another little secret about Faust. Faust, the sage of Assur, was respected by the whole country. He loved knowledge but did not get close to women, and lived a quiet life. But when he saw Samir, his soul never had peace, because he fell in love with Samir. In addition to knowledge, the sage of Assur also yearned for love, but this wish was almost impossible to realize. When Aman came back to his senses, holding the blood-red stone in his hand, the sun had already risen over the valley, and before he knew it, it was already noon. Goliath and Faust ended their conversation, and Faust stood up, bowed to Goliath, and then walked down the hill. Although Aman had been discussing things with Marduk, he also clearly knew what had happened. Goliath did not ask Faust to do anything, but only talked about Faust's wishes and Seneca's actions, pointed out the past, present, and future of the Assur Empire, and proposed a possible choice. Only by changing the king and changing its national policy could this disaster end. To put it bluntly, it was to launch a palace coup, and let Emperor Sinek die at the peak of his life. But the new king must have the support of all the forces in the country, and be able to control the priests, bureaucrats, and military groups. This person must have enough authority, and at the same time must have the desire to change the national policy. With regards to Golier's words, Faust neither agreed nor disagreed. He only silently bade farewell and left. Samir also heard all these words, but she remained expressionless and silent. When Faust walked past her, she also turned around and walked down the hill. Goliath held his wine glass and watched the backs of the two disappear into the boundless peaks. Faust silently walked on the road back to Enroll, his heart suffering. Everything Goliath said was right, and that was what his desire was referring to. He did not say anything negative during the meeting, but in fact he had already expressed his attitude. The desire in his heart had already sprouted. Samuel was walking right behind him. Faust had allowed a level 9 swordsman to be so close and defenseless. If Samuel wanted to prevent a possible coup in the future, it would be very easy for him to kill him now. But the queen did not make a move. After walking out of the mountains and into the plains, Faust suddenly heard Samir's voice. "No matter what you want to do, I will not hurt Sinek." Faust did not look back, but asked in return, "Do you still believe in that god? My faith is gradually drifting away from him." Samir replied, "My vow may have nothing to do with the god." Faust sighed, "Your Majesty, you can kill me. I would rather die in your hands to end this pain." Samir answered with silence. She did not make a move. The two crossed a stream in the wilderness and walked into a lush forest. Faust suddenly heard an ethereal voice. "Wise man of the world, why are you so miserable? The knowledge you seek has changed the king, and it is not what you want to see. The love you seek is right beside you, but you cannot speak. You are so sick that you do not know where your illness lies. Why do you have to endure and witness the disappointment of yourself? Tell yourself what you want, release your soul, and accept the guidance of that joy. Faust was shocked. The voice came from far away and directly imprinted into his soul. Samir, who was behind him, could not hear it. Even with Faust's means, he could not detect the source of the voice, which meant that this person's magic was superior to his. Perhaps only a god could do this. Years of cultivation had made him very calm in the face of trouble, and he did not show any abnormality on the surface. While walking, he asked in his soul, "Who are you and which god are you?" Then a scene appeared in front of Faust's eyes, directly appearing in the world of soul meditation. A god stood on the clouds in the sky, smiled and replied, "You can call me Sudan, or Mephisto according to the language of Assyria. I am the opponent, helping you to fight against the disappointing fate." This was the manifestation of Ammonius' avatar, completely different from his usual appearance. This image was created by the artists of the world, and came from the murals and carvings of the Empire of Igut. The Empire of Igut once claimed that the name of the blasphemous demon was Sudan, and he tempted people to fight against the will of the gods. If written in the Anunnaki language, it would be Mephisto. The pharaoh of Merneptah did not announce that this person was Ammon, but the craftsmen and artists of the world created this image and depicted it in the murals of shrines and even the carvings of mausoleums. The theme was often that people got rid of the temptation of Sudan and looked up to the glory of the gods, or that the gods defeated Sudan, and so on. The artists of Igut gave Sudan a dual image in their works. A perfect and handsome face, but behind him was shrouded in a layer of black mist. And in the black mist was a shadow, and in the shadow was a ferocious long horn and a pointed tail. Ammon had just accidentally learned that Marduk had another name called Poxen, and he could not help but remember that he also had another name called Allaha, and that he also had a human title Sudan. No one knew that Sudan was Ammon, but this image was become vivid in the imagination of countless people. With just a thought, Ammon manifested this image and appeared in Faust's soul. This was not a sudden idea for no reason, and such an identity happened to be in line with what he wanted to do. Faust instinctively scolded in his soul, "Mephisto, do not shake my faith." Ammon smiled. "If that is your faith, I cannot shake it." The faith of a person has always been the master of their heart. I just want you to examine your heart. Please release your desire, and tell yourself how to fulfill it. Along with these words, a piece of information was naturally imprinted into the depths of Faust's soul, precisely hitting the secret of the Supreme Mage's heart. Ammon knew Faust's desire. What he wanted was not knowledge itself, but the fruit of wisdom. What he wanted was not abstract love, but Samir who was beside him. What he wanted was not the power of magic, but the hope to be able to transcend the suffering of life. This information was like a blazing brand into the soul, and Faust could not help but tremble. Samir, who was behind him, asked, "What's wrong, Sage?" Faust hurriedly replied, "Nothing, I just feel pain, the pain of making a choice." Ammon spoke again in his soul. "Faust, if you make a choice and let me help you fulfill your wish, we can make a deal." Faust asked in a half-moan, "What deal?" Ammon had not thought of making any exchange with Faust, but at this moment he felt that this might be another option to test the soul of the human world. So he slowly replied, "Your desire is the master of your heart, and the power that I guide is its servant. When the day comes when it is fulfilled, please offer your soul." Faust asked in reply, "But how can you get it? That is the illusory of many friends." Ammon smiled. "The gods have their own means. When the servant becomes the master, you will understand. If you agree, I can tell you an answer right now, and that is to become the source of the power of the gods. And Queen Samir, who is beside you, actually knows this secret. The answer that you have been searching for in the sea of knowledge has long existed in a place that you cannot see." Faust asked again, "You seem to be able to see through the soul of a person. Please tell me, does Samir love me?" Ammon smiled again. "Your desire is the master of faith, and my power is only its servant. So you should ask yourself, will Samir love you? If Cynic is still here, you will never get her. Goliath has already told you what to do, isn't that what you want?" Samir was walking when she suddenly saw Faust turn around and say to her, "Your Majesty, if His Majesty Cynic wants to marry Princess Sisela and set up another queen, I, the Empire's chief high priest, must preside over the ceremony and clearly point out your mistakes." Samir replied with an expressionless face. With Seneca's madness, he can easily set up 2 queens and change the laws of the empire. But the ceremony indeed needs you to preside over. You should soon receive the order for you to go. Faust, I'm asking you to go with me. This is both a request and an order. Although I have never exercised this authority, as the chief high priest of the empire, I have the right to request His Majesty to have another queen present during the ceremony, regardless of whether His Majesty intends to depose you or not. Recently, the most important event in the Kingdom of Babylon was the marriage of Princess Sisela. The marriage of a princess to another king was usually a symbol of an alliance between the 2 kingdoms. It was a very common political marriage. For example, the former pharaoh Lazith II of Igut once married the daughter of the former king of Hittite, Lucier. At that time, the 2 kingdoms signed a peace treaty after a great war. But now, the situation was clear to everyone. Princess Sisela's marriage to Cynic meant that the Kingdom of Babylon submitted to the Assur Empire. This meant that the 2 kingdoms had acknowledged the current alliance, but it also meant that they were being controlled by someone else. In any case, the weakened Babylon kingdom needed a breather. Many hoped that the beautiful and wise Princess Sisela could bring peace and a turning point to the kingdom. Although the Kingdom of Babylon had just been defeated, the dowry of Princess Sisela was still extravagant. Dozens of luxurious carriages were filled with them. The place where Emperor Cynic married the princess was in the former Kingdom of Babylon, which had now become the new territory of Assur. Lis was a rich and prosperous city. It was the last of the 6 cities that fell to the Assur Empire. At that time, under Faust's suggestion, the Assur Empire's new policies had been implemented. Thus, the damage to the city was relatively minor, and the prosperity of the past was mostly preserved. After Cynic took over Lis, he moved all the natives to different places. He also moved a large number of people from other occupied areas to settle in Lis. They were given land to serve the kingdom and to pay taxes. Lis was located on the east bank of the Lis River. The Lis River and the lower reaches of the Euphrates River converged, forming a vast plain. Babylon was the birthplace of an ancient civilization. After Cynic took over Lis, his military expansion had reached its limit. The Assur army had to manage the vast occupied areas, and the destroyed areas had yet to be restored. So the emperor decided to temporarily halt his army. Chapter 243. Cynic ordered the construction of 2 buildings in the city. One was the Shrine of Enlil, and the other was the emperor's palace. He wanted this city to be his second capital in the new territory. In the mind of this great emperor, in addition to the original capital of Assyria, Nineveh, he wanted to build 2 auxiliary capitals, the other one to be in the plains of Duk, and he had even thought of the location, which was where the city of Taling is today. The Shrine of Enlil was easy to build. The original Marduk shrine in the city would be remodeled. The main building would remain, and the main statue would be replaced with Enlil's. However, it was a little troublesome to transform the original mansion into a palace. Cynic thought that the mansion was too shabby, and ordered the nearby buildings to be demolished and rebuilt. What he wanted was a grand and luxurious palace. The Assyrian Empire mobilized a large number of newly conquered slaves to build Seneca's palace. The deadline was very tight. Many craftsmen and slaves died of exhaustion in the quarries, and many were cruelly punished for failing to complete the task. The palace was still under construction, but the main hall and Seneca's residence had already been completed. Cynic planned to marry Princess Sisela here, and the princess would also live in the palace after the wedding. Cynic sent a procession to Babylon to escort the princess, both to escort the princess and to ensure her safety. At some point, there was a rumor that someone wanted to assassinate Princess Sisela. The assassin might be a fanatic from the Assyrian military, and they wanted to stop Cynic from marrying the princess and ending the war. This rumor was very interesting. It was possible that some extremists in the Assyrian military had the idea, but it was the main forces of the Babylon kingdom who wanted to assassinate Princess Sisela. Since there was such a rumor, The Assyrian Empire naturally had to escort the princess safely to Lys. The Babylon kingdom also sent a team of guards, and some warriors who worshipped the princess also followed behind the procession. The procession was rather complicated. In front of the procession was the Assur kingdom's guard of honor. In the middle of the procession were the Babylon kingdom's guards, who were escorting the princess's carriage. Behind the long procession were warriors who were equipped with their own weapons and rations. After leaving Babylon city, they would travel along the west bank of the Lizi River to reach Sennacherib's palace. It would take them more than half a month to travel, and they would have to camp in many towns along the way. Although everyone had raised their vigilance to guard against the appearance of assassins, the journey out of Babylon city was peaceful. Nothing out of the ordinary happened. On the contrary, many people spontaneously greeted the princess by the roadside. Some were crying, some were singing poems, and some were representing the nobles of the towns to pay their respects to the princess and present gifts. The princess did not receive any guests. All the gifts were received by the supreme mage Peri, who accompanied her and conveyed her gratitude. On the third day, there was finally a small problem. People almost thought that it was an assassin, but it turned out to be a misunderstanding. That morning, not long after the princess's entourage left the town where they had set up camp, they passed through a stretch of lush green fields. The official road in front of them took a turn, and on the left there was a small hill. There were not many trees on the hill, and it was a grassy slope that was knee-high. Halfway down the mountain, a man shouted from the top of the mountain, "Princess Sisela, I'm here to protect you." The man's voice traveled far and wide, and the entire entourage heard him. His voice caused a commotion. The guards and warriors in the front and back turned around, their bows knocked and their swords unsheathed. Peri, with his staff in hand, jumped onto the roof of the princess's carriage. The well-trained Assyrian warriors at the front had already turned their horses around and rushed to the foot of the hill, raising their heavy crossbows. There was only one person at the top of the mountain. He was wearing the most dazzling warrior armor on the continent. It was made of damask steel and covered with heavy silver. It was also engraved with the patterns of divine spells. This man did not carry a sword. Instead, he had a curved fang-like scimitar hanging from his waist. The hilt of the scimitar was tied with a silk ribbon, and the hilt was long like a short staff with a flame sprite embedded in the end. Amidst the tense atmosphere, he walked down the hill in big strides with a smile on his face and a spirited look on his face. Krips, the leader of the escort team sent by the Assyrian Empire, had already surrounded the foot of the mountain with his cavalry. "Halt," he shouted. "Do not trespass on the princess's carriage, or you will be killed." As if he didn't hear him, Madanzo waved at Peri from afar. "Peri, we meet again. I'm Madanzo. Do you still remember me? Oh, I heard you're already a supreme mage, at least the 8th level, right?" Those who didn't know his background wouldn't know how close he was to Peri. Madanzo didn't slow down as he spoke. He strode forward in big strides, already within the range of the crossbows. Peri frowned and was about to shout, but the sound of bowstrings rang out. The knights of the escort team had released their arrows in unison. They only listened to their captain's orders. Krips had already ordered Madanzo to stop, but Madanzo didn't. These people were used to killing on the battlefield, and as soon as they saw Madanzo walk into their range, they shot their arrows without hesitation. The arrows shot by the strong warriors were powerful enough to pierce through a bull. In the blink of an eye, they would turn Madanzo into a hedgehog. Many people at the back of the caravan cried out in alarm. However, Metatro didn't even draw his saber. He didn't dodge or block. He didn't even stop moving. With a wave of his hand, he left a series of afterimages in the air. It was as if his arm had turned into countless arms and caught all the crossbow bolts in his hand. He held a handful of them in his hand. Although the distance was a little far, an ordinary person's skin and flesh would have been rubbed off if he had caught the arrow. It was not easy to catch it, but Metatro had caught it as easily as if it was a stalk of grass. After exclaiming in surprise, everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. Krips had already unsheathed his sword, and his knights had raised their spears and were ready to charge. They knew that they had encountered a powerful opponent. At this moment they heard a delicate shout, "Stop! This warrior is my friend. He's here to protect me. Didn't you hear him?" Everyone looked up and saw that Princess Sisela had already lifted the curtain and was standing in front of the carriage shaft. Her silhouette was delicate and her hair was fluttering gently in the morning breeze. However, her pretty face was cold and her voice carried an irresistible majesty. "Did you hear that?" Metatro shouted again in a high-spirited manner. "Her Highness has summoned me. Put down your weapons." As he spoke, he walked towards the caravan at the foot of the mountain. Cripps rode up to Princess Sisela and said in a displeased tone, "Your Highness, this man is skilled and we don't know why he's here. You can't act on your own." Princess Sisela retorted, "What do you mean? Do you have the final say? He's a warrior that I personally conferred to the kingdom. When I was kidnapped by the giants on the Saya Plateau, it was he who risked his life to save me and escort me back to the capital. Of course you don't know him, but he's my friend. Perry can testify for me." Perry, who had jumped off the carriage, explained awkwardly, "Yes, his name is Medanzo. He did rescue and protect your Highness, so your Highness conferred him the title of a noble warrior." "But," Princess Sisela interrupted with a sullen face, "but what? He's my savior, a noble knight. What's wrong with escorting me?" Cripps grumbled in his heart. Of course, there were many heroes of the kingdom who worshipped and followed Princess Sisela. There were dozens of them following behind the caravan, but they were not part of the royal guards and could not disturb the princess's carriage. They could only bring their own rations with them. Who would have thought that Medanzo would come and greet the princess so openly? Cripps straightened his neck and shouted, "I've been ordered by Emperor Cynic to protect your Highness. I'll be in charge of all the security along the way. Do not let this dangerous and unknown man get close to your carriage." Princess Sisela was furious. She didn't give him any face and snapped, "Cripps, are you trying to commit treason? It's not up to you to say whether this man is trustworthy or not. Only I have the final say. There's no way you don't know who I am, and why I'm going to assert. If he isn't trustworthy, then there's no one here, including you, who is. I won't stop you from carrying out the orders of the Emperor, but please consider your identity and future. Guards, disperse. Summon the hero." Cripps was choked for a moment. His face turned red, and he almost couldn't speak. He was one of the leaders of Seneca's palace guards and a supreme warrior. He was sent here on a mission to escort the princess to Assur. Originally, he despised the people of Babylon Kingdom. Just now, he was ready to kill Medanzo if he wanted to. But Princess Sisela's words were like a bucket of cold water poured over his head. It was a warning that made his skin crawl. The princess was going to marry the Emperor of Assur and become the Empress of the Assur Empire. No matter what her motives were, once she became the Empress, even if she only won Seneca's favor, it wouldn't be difficult for her to find an opportunity to get rid of him, the leader of the palace guards. If Princess Sisela wanted to kill someone with a borrowed knife to vent her anger, would Emperor Cynic protect the queen or the captain of the royal guards? Princess Sisela's words were clearly hinting, "Don't talk back to me. Don't be fooled by your prestige now. When I become the Empress of Assur, I'll be able to take care of you." Cripps's mind raced as he realized that the princess in front of him wasn't someone to be trifled with. So he bowed and said, "Your Highness, I'm only doing this out of consideration for your safety. Since you have absolute trust in him, then let him come." He then waved his hand and ordered his knights to clear a path. Medanzo walked to the front of the carriage and bowed to the princess. "My beautiful princess, do you still remember what you said back then? When I escorted you from the town of Arcade to the capital of Babylon, you said that on the day of your marriage, you would let us brave men accompany you. I've always remembered it. That's why I came here today." Princess Sisela did say these words, but she was joking with her guards. Someone asked her when she was going to marry Gilgamesh. Princess Sisela didn't answer directly, so she said those words. Today, she was indeed going to get married, but to Emperor Cynic. Princess Sisela looked at Medanzo, and for some reason, her heart was filled with emotions. She wanted to show a noble smile, but it was very faint. She waved her hand gracefully and said, "Thank you, my noble hero." Then she turned to Perry and said in a commanding tone, "Give this hero the best horse you have. Tell him to follow my carriage." Perry was stunned. He wanted to dissuade her but didn't say anything. The supreme mage suddenly realized that the woman in front of him, be it the Princess of Babylon or the Empress of Assur, was not someone to be trifled with. He even regretted accepting the bribe of the Assur Empire. He had been spying on the princess for so many days, and it might be a thankless task to do so. No matter how much pressure the princess was under, the only one who could truly offend her was Emperor Cynic himself. Everyone else had better learn their lesson. So Madanzo rode a pure white horse next to the princess's carriage. In front of him was a dazzling ceremonial guard, and behind him was a luxurious caravan. He was the most eye-catching person in the entire procession. He took out a fiery red cloak out of nowhere and put it over his bright silver armor. Only those in the know would know that he was a brave warrior who had volunteered to protect the princess. But those who didn't know the truth would think that he was the groom who had come to pick up the bride. Princess Sisela was talking to Madanzo through the curtain in the carriage. She said in a low voice, "I heard that you followed Supreme General Amon to Salem." "No, I should call you Ammonius now. It is said that Supreme General Igut was actually a god who walked among the mortals. Is that true?" Madanzo raised his head and answered, "Yes. He is a true god, my only god." For some reason, the princess sighed and said, "You shouldn't have come here. Salem has just fought against the Assyrian Empire in the plains of Duk. If they knew who you are, they would have treated you as a dangerous enemy." Princess Sisela naturally knew who Madanzo was, and so did Perry, the supreme mage who accompanied her. Perry wanted to remind her, but was stopped by the princess. Crips, the supreme warrior sent by Cynic, had been living in the capital of Assyria for a long time. He had been in charge of the Assyrian imperial army for a long time, so he didn't know much about the news from afar. Madanzo was only the captain of Supreme General Amon's bodyguard. Even after he came to Salem, he only showed up a few times in the war. It was normal that Crips had not heard of him. Madanzo smiled and said, "This is the territory of the Kingdom of Babylon. I used to be a noble warrior of the Kingdom of Babylon. Why can't I come with you? In order to protect you, I am not afraid of any danger. I will escort you all the way to the Lys River. You will be safe after crossing the river." Madanzo wasn't stupid. He wouldn't cross the river with the convoy into a city guarded by the Assyrian army. He would only escort the princess to a safe place. The princess nodded silently. She couldn't help but ask in a concerned tone, "Before I left Babylon City, I heard the latest news. He was also in the battle against the giant legion. Is he all right?" Madanzo was a little surprised. He immediately understood that the princess was talking about was Gilgamesh. He couldn't help but feel a little disappointed, but he still replied politely, "He's fine. He's not as arrogant as he used to be. I wouldn't have noticed him if he hadn't shown up. He actually appeared in the battle as an ordinary archer." The princess was a little surprised. "Oh, how did he dress up? I can't imagine him like that." Madanzo had no choice but to describe the scene of Gilgamesh's appearance on the battlefield. The princess couldn't help covering her mouth as she listened to the shocking battle. Finally, she put her hand on her chest and asked, "Where did he go after the battle? How did he react when he heard the latest news from the Kingdom of Babylon?" There was a hidden meaning in the princess' words. What she really wanted to ask was, how did Gilgamesh react when he heard that Cynic was going to force her to marry him? What did he say? But it wasn't a good time to ask directly. Madanzo sighed and answered, "Unfortunately, I don't know either. I rushed here as soon as I heard the news. I wasn't with Gilgamesh at the time." Then both of them fell silent. The princess looked at the hazy scenery outside the carriage through the gauze curtain, sighing for someone. Madanzo's appearance had evoked her memories of the past. At this moment, the person she missed the most was her ex-fiancé, Gilgamesh, who had never cared about her. Where was Gilgamesh at this moment? Princess Sisela would never have imagined that the once noble hero was now wearing a shabby linen robe and a pair of worn boots, rushing to the Kingdom of Babylon. After entering the city, he went straight to Prince Binut's mansion. When he walked towards the gate, a guard at the gate immediately stopped him. Gilgamesh didn't move. He stood on the stone steps and said, "Please inform the guard that I want to see Prince Binut. My name is Gilgamesh." The bodyguard had already raised his leg to make a faint kick, and was about to glare at Gilgamesh when he heard Gilgamesh's last sentence. He froze in place and rubbed his eyes in disbelief. Putting down his leg, he stretched out his head and asked, Are you really Gilgamesh? Gilgamesh answered calmly, What good would it do me to pretend to be Gilgamesh in this place? That's right. Someone pretending to be Gilgamesh in front of Prince Binut's mansion is no different from seeking death. The guard went in to inform the guard of Gilgamesh's arrival. After a while, the gate opened and Prince Binut came out to greet Gilgamesh. He bowed from afar. Gilgamesh, is it really you? My apologies, my servants have been rude. Gilgamesh shook his head. They have not been rude. Thank you for coming out to greet me personally. I have an important matter to discuss with you. I wonder if your highness has the time? Chapter 244. When Gilgamesh entered the city of Babylon, Faust was also ordered to rush to the new city of Dulis. As the chief high priest of the Assyrian Empire, he should be the one presiding over such an important ceremony as the coronation of the empress. To Seneca's surprise, Faust also brought another empress, Samir. Seneca was displeased. Although he didn't ask for Samir's opinion before marrying Princess Sisela, he still wanted to change the laws of the empire. He didn't want to reprimand Faust in front of everyone, so he asked Samir, The war on the plains of Duk is not going well. Why are you here? Samir replied, I'm here to ask your majesty, do you want to abolish me and appoint a new empress? Or do you want to marry Princess Sisela? If you're marrying a concubine, I think I should be present. That was what the sage imperial tutor had requested. If you want to abolish the empress and appoint a new empress, I want to hear it in person. What have I done wrong? Seneca's expression was a little awkward. He wanted to explode, but he held back. He waved his hand and said, Warder, show me the blueprint of my empire. The court supreme mage bowed and walked to the center of the inner hall. With a wave of his staff, he showed the crowd a bright light. The light showed what seemed to be a battle sand table. After unfolding, it was a three-dimensional map of the continent, with different regions marked with different colors. The gold area was the former territory of the Assyrian Empire. The city of Nineveh was a bright spot. There were two yellow areas. One was the 6 newly conquered cities of the Kingdom of Babylon, and the location of the city of Reis was also marked with a gold T. The other area was bordering the Assyrian Empire through the Assyrian Plateau, occupying half of the fertile land of the plains of Duk in the north. The location of Salem was also marked with a gold dot. Obviously, the yellow area in the plains of Duk was the land that the Assyrian Empire planned to occupy. In the eyes of Emperor Seneca, Salem already belonged to the Assyrian Empire. What was even more intriguing was that there was a pink area on the map, which not only included the current territory of the Kingdom of Babylon, but also extended westward, including the land on the west bank of the Euphrates River that was previously occupied by the Hittite Kingdom, the former city of Marduk, and the entire southern part of the plains of Duk. This was Seneca's vision for the Assyrian Empire. Not only did he want to control the entire Kingdom of Babylon, but he also wanted to expand his sphere of influence beyond the west bank of the Euphrates River, and occupy the entire plains of Duk. At that time, it would be a great empire like never before. The Euphrates River, the Lis River, and the Saya Plateau, where they originated, would all belong to the empire. The people sitting in the inner hall were all important ministers of the empire. Other than Samir, Faust, and White, there was also the Prime Minister Alpha and the leaders of the two frontline armies. Shinnok pointed at the blueprint and said to Samir, Do you see the positions of the 3 gold dots on it? They are the 3 capitals of the Assyrian Empire. Needless to say, we are now in the city of Tunis. Queen Sisela will live in the palace here, symbolizing the rule of the Assyrian Empire over the Kingdom of Babylon. Samir frowned slightly and asked, Then what about the other capital? Who are you preparing it for? Shinnok smiled and said, For my queen that is the other capital I want to build, in which there will be the most magnificent palaces and shrines, and the palace in the plains of Duk will belong to you. Samir's expression did not show any surprise, and he said lightly, Your Majesty, you are very thoughtful. Shinnok pointed to the location of the city of Salem and said, Although the giant legion has lost the battle, the war in the kingdom of Babylon has subsided. Soon, I will mobilize the elite corps into the plains of Duk and crush the resistance of Salem in one fell swoop. As long as Salem is captured, the northern part of the plains of Duk will become the new territory of the Assyrian Empire. In addition to the existing city of Enril and the city of Salem, the eastern and western parts of the city are enough to develop 3 new cities. At that time, I will specially build a new capital and an imperial palace for you and my Empress Samir. The ministers all stood up and saluted. Great King, the invincible Assyrian Emperor, the whole continent will submit to your majesty. Faust frowned inwardly. The blueprint in front of him clearly outlined Shinaka's ambitions, and his strategy was obviously divided into 3 steps. The first step was to capture the eastern part of the Lys River and the northern part of the plains of Duk. So far, this step had been largely achieved, and the only small mistake was that they did not successfully capture Salem. The second step was also close to success, which was to control the entire kingdom of Babylon through Princess Sisela, marry her, and make her the Queen of Babylon. Shinaka's display of such a strategic blueprint in public was both a consolation and a warning to Samir. He was going to build a new capital for her, symbolizing his rule over the new territory of the plains of Duk. At the same time, he was also reminding Samir not to cause trouble, as marrying Princess Sisela was part of the empire's strategy. Samir did not say anything, and excused himself from the celebration with the excuse that he was tired from the long journey after the war. The ministers were still taking turns to offer their blessings and praise to Emperor Shinak. Shinak was very dissatisfied with Empress Samir's departure. The Empress had been very cold to him in recent years, almost never even smiling. She even used the excuse that she was practicing high-level body arts and did not even live with him. But Shinak had always tolerated her, and the reason was simple. Compared to a woman, a 9th-level supreme warrior, who was almost invincible on the battlefield, was much more significant. Moreover, this supreme warrior was the Empress, and it was a great boost to the morale of the Imperial Army. Watching Samir leave, Shinak asked Faust in a low voice, "Your Majesty, the Empress seems to be in a bad mood. Why did you let her come?" Faust smiled. "Your Majesty, if she doesn't come now, she will be even more dissatisfied in the future. Why don't you just accept it? This is the true demeanor of an emperor. Perhaps you don't understand women very well, but what Empress Samir wants is not a new capital and a palace specially built for her." Shinak looked at Faust. "Oh, could it be that the sage imperial tutor, who has always been cultivating alone, understands women better than me?" Faust lowered his head. "Perhaps I don't understand either." Princess Sisela's caravan traveled for more than 10 days. They spent the night in the last town on the west bank of the Lys River. The next day, they would cross the river and enter the city of Lys, which was occupied by the Assyrian Empire. The river in front of them was the new border between the Assyrian Empire and the Kingdom of Babylon. Shinak sent a large force to cross the river on the east bank. Although it was said that they were waiting for the princess, it was actually a show of force. That night, in a forest not far from the Lys River crossing, the Supreme Mage Gakate led a group of priests and warriors to set up camp. They did not light a fire, and their weapons gleamed in the dark. They were discussing the plan to assassinate Princess Sisela. They had to make their move before the crossing of the river. Once the princess crossed the river, they would have no chance. Under the moonlight, there was a sand table in the middle of the clearing. It was the location of the ambush. It was a valley road between 2 mountains. There was a string of pebbles on the road, representing the caravan, and the guards escorting the princess. Gakate pointed to the sand table. "We're almost at the crossing of the Lys River. Nothing has happened for so many days. They should be at their most relaxed." The most elite guards in the convoy were the guards of honor from the Assur Empire, led by a supreme warrior. At the back of the convoy was a group of warriors from the Kingdom of Babylon, and in the middle was Princess Sisela's personal guard. "We don't need to fight all the guards. We'll choose the narrowest part of the road and launch our attack from the middle. Once we succeed, we'll quickly disperse and retreat to the mountains. No one is allowed to stay. I've already arranged for our men to spread the news in the kingdom. Some will say that Princess Sisela committed suicide, while others will say that she was assassinated by a fanatic from the Assyrian army. A priest nodded. We've already spread the news that someone from the Assyrian army is trying to assassinate Princess Sisela. Let Shinnok investigate it himself. We'll set up a magic formation on the mountain. Before we strike, we'll destroy the rocks and cut off the caravan. We have to end the battle quickly. But the supreme mage by the princess side, Perry, isn't easy to deal with. Now I've heard that there's also a meddlesome Madanzo. Another priest interrupted. Leave Perry to me. Lord Gakate and General Iesi, keep Madanzo busy. The rest of you, attack the princess carriage with all your might. Once you succeed, don't continue fighting. By the time the guards in the front and back react, everything will be over. This man was masked and had a sword at his waist. He looked like a warrior, but his voice sounded like that of a supreme mage, Kane. Kane had also joined the assassination team, but he wasn't here to assassinate the princess. Gakate wanted to set up a trap on the mountain road to cut off the princess carriage. Little did he know that Perry would find out about his plan in the morning, and that there was a trap waiting for him. Gakate's men from the Babylon Academy of Magic, as well as the Babylon army, would all be killed in one fell swoop. Prince Binut would be accused of being the mastermind behind the princess assassination. Kane couldn't help but smile as he discussed the assassination plan with Gakate. He could almost see himself and Perry capturing Gakate alive together. Kane could not help but smile as he discussed the assassination plan with Gakate. At this moment, Gakate suddenly raised his head and made a warning gesture. Everyone stopped talking and picked up their weapons. Don't be nervous. It's me. Prince Binut sent me. A group of warriors emerged from the forest in the distance. Behind them were a dozen or so priests. In the middle of them was the head of the Babylon army, General Robin of the kingdom. Surprised, Gakate put away his staff and bowed. How did you find this place, head of the legion? Robin replied. His Highness already knew what you wanted to do. A group of priests and warriors suddenly disappeared. How could it not attract attention? He ordered me to keep an eye on you. His Highness has forgiven you for the assassination of the princess, but you must stop immediately. Gakate said anxiously. But you should know why I'm doing this. Now that everything is ready, we just need to. Robin interrupted him firmly. I've already found this place. Can you guarantee that the Assur Empire hasn't thought of this? If you really try to assassinate the princess, you will only be throwing your life away and putting His Highness in a disadvantageous position. I'm here to carry out His Highness's orders. If you don't want to commit treason, come back with me immediately. Kane was very disappointed. When he saw Robin appear, he realized that his plan to lure Gakate and the others into a trap had failed. Gakate and Kane were unwilling to give up, but their commander had arrived with the prince's orders, so they lowered their heads and walked over. The assassination attempt had failed before it could even be carried out. Early the next morning, when Princess Sisela's convoy set off again, Madanzo noticed that something was wrong. The princess did not sit in her original carriage, but in a carriage protected by a magic formation. She blended in with the convoy transporting the dowry. Many guards were also hiding in the carriages with weapons in their hands. A few new faces suddenly appeared in the group. They seemed to be experts. They were dressed as ordinary warriors and accompanied the carriages on both sides. It was clear that they were lying in ambush, waiting for the assassins to come. Metatro asked Perry what was going on, and Perry told him that there was a long and narrow road between two mountains. It was the most suitable terrain for an ambush, so they had to make preparations in advance to prevent any accidents. Madanzo did not say much. Today was probably the last day he would be escorting Princess Sisela. He was here to protect the princess, so it was better to be prepared. Not long after the convoy set off, they entered a long and narrow valley with steep cliffs on both sides. It was perfect for an ambush. But even when the convoy left the mountains, the surroundings were still quiet. Nothing happened. When the convoy reached the plains, another group of warriors emerged from the forest on both sides. The leader shook his head at Cripps, indicating that he too had not found anything. It seemed that not only the convoy was prepared, but there were also ambushes in the mountains. If the assassins chose to strike here, they would all be caught in one fell swoop. After leaving the mountains and entering the plains, Princess Sisela returned to her carriage. The Lys River crossing was not far ahead. Madanzo, still in his red robe, rode beside the princess's carriage on his white horse. The two groups of warriors that emerged from the forest also met up with the guards. They all heaved a sigh of relief. Just then, the sound of galloping horses could be heard again. The guards could not help but feel nervous. Madanzo looked back and saw a group of warriors bearing the banner of Prince Binut galloping towards them. They had openly displayed their banner, and Prince Binut himself was here. It was obvious that they were not here to assassinate the princess. A voice shouted, "Your Highness, Prince Binut has come to see you off." It was Robin, the commander of Babylon's army. The convoy came to a halt. Prince Binut circled around to the side of Princess Sisela's carriage. The princess lifted the curtain and asked, "My dear nephew, why are you here?" Prince Binut bowed from the back of his horse. "My dear aunt, Binut is very sad that you are going to marry far away. I was too busy with the affairs of the kingdom to see you off. Today, I have come all the way to the border. I will personally see you off at the crossing and host a banquet for the warriors of the Assyrian Empire. I will express my gratitude to you on behalf of the Kingdom of Babylon." Princess Sisela smiled and waved at him. "It's rare for you to come all the way to see me off. Come, sit in my carriage. We will go to the crossing together." Prince Binut dismounted and said, "That's exactly what I was thinking. I would like to ask to ride with you, aunt." He left his guards and boarded Princess Sisela's carriage. Apart from him and the princess, there were also the princess's two maids in the carriage. Prince Binut and Princess Sisela rode in the same carriage. Madanzo was listening attentively to what they were talking about. As soon as Prince Binut sat down, he said calmly, "My aunt, one of my men tried to assassinate you. The original plan was set today. Fortunately, I discovered it in time and stopped it." Princess Sisela did not know what to say. She sighed and lowered her head. "I can understand why they did that. Thank you for stopping it. Perhaps it would be better for your position in the kingdom if they succeeded." Prince Binut shook his head and said, "No matter what happened between us in the past, you are innocent right now. On the other hand, your marriage with Sinek may not be a bad thing for the Kingdom of Babylon." Princess Sisela glanced at her nephew, who was 2 years older than her, and said meaningfully, "Your men tried to assassinate me, but not only did they not succeed, they also did you no good. If you are really that scheming, make sure to be more careful next time. Don't let them prepare in advance and turn it into a trap for you." Both Prince Binut and Madanzo were shocked. Princess Sisela's words were clearly reminding them that the assassination plan had been leaked long ago. How could there be a spy from the Assyrian Empire in such a secretive operation? It was a sad reminder. Princess Sisela was also hinting to Binut that if he really wanted to assassinate her, he should not have made such a mistake. If he did not have the ability, he should not have done such a thing. If he could not do such a thing well, how could he be a competent monarch in the future? The conversation between Princess Sisela and Prince Binut was clearly heard by Peri and the Assyrian Empire's spies. If Prince Binut wanted to send her any message, even if it was just a piece of paper, the detection magic circle in the carriage would be able to detect it at any time. There was no chance for them to discuss any conspiracy. When the convoy arrived at the ferry, Prince Binut personally helped Princess Sisela out of the carriage. At this moment, Princess Sisela's expression suddenly froze. Binut really did have a plan. He helped her out of the carriage. When he let go, he gently touched the back of her hand. Something was missing from her hand, but at the same time, something was added. Chapter 245. It was made by Ammonius with the venom he had obtained from Scorpion the Fifth. Normally, the venom would not leak out. But if you take it off and break it, it will form a sharp thorn that can cut through the skin. It was prepared for Sinek. Ammonius gave it to Gilgamesh, who in turn gave it to me. If you are unfortunate enough to be trapped in the Assyrian Empire, you can decide when and if you want to use it. But we don't want you to use it yourself. If possible, please try to lure Sinek to the outskirts of the mountains. Gilgamesh will come and save you. The fate of the kingdom cannot be borne by a woman like you. A true hero should be prepared. It was made from precious materials such as hawksbill, coral, and shells. It was a kind of ornament used by noble women on the continent to decorate their nails. Unlike other jewelry, it didn't need to be unloaded and unloaded every day because the nails wouldn't sweat. It was made with a colorless, transparent, and fragrant glue made from fish bones. Unless the nails grew long, it could be trimmed off along with the nails, just like a part of the nails. In other words, no matter if the princess underwent the most rigorous body search or detection magic search, even if all the good things on her, including her undergarments and accessories, were changed, the shell would still be there. Only someone who knew the lifestyle of noble women very well could come up with this idea. Gilgamesh was probably the one who came up with it. However, that piece of armor was personally made by a god, and that god was once the descendant of the best master craftsman on the continent. Usually, there was no leakage of poison, and as long as it was not taken off or broken, no one would be able to detect any abnormalities. Even the most brilliant detection magic would not be able to detect anything wrong with it. After Amon succeeded, he had asked several supreme mages around him to test it. As for the message attached to the shell, it could only be released once and would disappear without a trace. It was left in the shell by Amon according to Gilgamesh's request. Only one person could hear it, no one else could detect it. Princess Sisela subconsciously clenched her fists and hid her nails in her palms. She wanted to look down at her hands, but she resisted the urge. Her lips were pale and her body was trembling. She didn't expect Gilgamesh to go to Binut, let alone ask Prince Binut to bring such a thing. The poison armor was prepared for Sinak, but it was also prepared for Princess Sisela herself. Princess Sisela could have used it to kill Sinak, but it would have been easier for her to kill herself with it. These were the choices she had to make when she had no other choice. However, Princess Sisela has another option, which is to not use it at all. Gilgamesh had said that he did not want to see her use it. What then did Jill mean? The message also mentioned the hope that she could lure Sinek into the wilderness, and he would come to her rescue. If Princess Sisela could have escaped, she would have done so long ago. But now she had no other choice. The message was clearly hinting that someone was looking for an opportunity to assassinate Shinnok. She was hoping that Princess Sisela would create that opportunity. Was Gilgamesh trying to assassinate Sinek? Did he trust her that much? Wasn't he afraid that she would tell Sinek? What should she do? Princess Sisela was in a trance before she crossed the river. Even when Prince Binut hosted a banquet for the Assyrian Empire's wedding procession, she excused herself by saying that she was tired from the journey. After the banquet, Princess Sisela crossed the Lys River. Madanzo bid farewell to her. The princess expressed her gratitude and respect to the brave warrior, and gave him the pure white horse. But Madanzo noticed that the princess was distracted as she spoke, as if her mind had drifted far away. He watched as the princess's ship safely reached the other side of the river under the escort of the warrior warships. Then he left on his white horse. Prince Binut rewarded the folk warriors who escorted the princess, and asked Madanzo to stay for a chat. He was not only trying to express his gratitude, but also to win him over. But Madanzo was not in the mood to say anything. He politely declined Prince Binut's hospitality and left, quickly disappearing into the forest at the end of the field. There were still people who wanted to follow Madanzo, but Prince Binut waved them off. Metatro rode upstream along the west bank of the Uris River, neither too fast nor too slow, but he did not stop. When the sun went down, he passed through a ravine and disappeared. The messenger of the Garden of Eden had hidden his tracks. Unless someone used detection magic not far away to conduct a large-scale disturbance detection, they would not be able to find him. Madanzo walked until late at night. When the moon was high in the sky, he turned his horse eastward towards the Lys River. The river flowed continuously under the moonlight, reflecting the cold and gentle light. The sound of the flowing water was especially clear in the night, as if someone was singing and talking about something. On the other side of the river were rolling hills. In the north, there were shrubs connecting to the primitive forest, and in the south, there were grassy slopes connecting to the fields. Metatro urged the horse to walk directly into the river. The horse instinctively stopped at the riverside. Metatro waved his hand, and the white horse suddenly raised its head and galloped forward. It actually rode on the waves and galloped across the river. Madanzo's fiery red cloak fluttered in the night breeze, revealing the silver warrior's armor. He crossed the river and disappeared into the night. Princess Sisela crossed the Lys River. The opposite bank was heavily guarded by the soldiers of the Asur Empire, and the welcoming party sent by the city of Lys. As the fiancée of the Asur Great Emperor, her daily life was naturally taken care of by her maidservants. The male guards could only protect her from the outside. A temporary camp was set up at the western bank of the river. Cedar wood was cut down to build an exquisite house, surrounded by large tents made of animal hide. Escorted by the guards, Princess Sisela walked towards the temporary camp. There was already a group of Asur's palace maids waiting for her. The maids and guards all bowed to the princess. In the middle of the group stood a pen pal. She was also a woman, but she looked even more muscular than the burly men. The princess was tall and slender, but her height only reached her shoulders. She was a mighty female giant. She did not wear the clothes of a palace maid, nor was she dressed like an armored warrior. She looked very conspicuous. The princess also noticed one thing. Be it the palace maids or the guards, none of them dared to approach the female giant. There was no one within 5 steps of her. As the crowd bowed to her, the princess stepped forward and asked, "Who is this? Why isn't she bowing to me?" The officer of the Ministry of Interior, who had accompanied Princess Sisela to the camp, looked embarrassed and a little scared. He was about to explain when the female giant heard the princess's words and said in a loud voice, "Your Royal Highness, I'm Ili. I'm here to protect you and to keep an eye on you. If I don't want to, I don't even have to bow to Cynic. This is the special permission of the Asur Great Emperor. From now on, until you officially marry Cynic, you must listen to my orders. As for whether you are happy or not, I don't care." Krips, the supreme warrior behind the princess, couldn't help but frown. He had always been the commander of Seneca's imperial guards, but he had no idea where His Majesty found such a woman. He had never seen her before. But judging from the aura she exuded, she was at least a supreme warrior stronger than him. Was she sent by Queen Samir? Krips pondered to himself, but he didn't dare to say anything. What Krips didn't know was that this female giant Ili was actually a god, the flying bull goddess worshipped by the Assyrians. In the pantheon of gods, she wasn't a true god, but a 9th-level divine emissary. When the Asur Great Emperor built the Temple of Enlil in Lisbon, he prayed to the gods and reported his plan to marry Princess Sisela. As a result, Enlil sent a divine emissary to assist and protect him. 9th-level divine emissaries who had passed the test of endless arising and ceasing cycle were known as gods in the mortal world. Many of their habits were the same as the real gods, and they were unwilling to directly intervene in the battles of the mortal world. Why would they come here to monitor the princess? In fact, it was Ili who took the initiative to ask Enlil. Her twin sister, the flying bull goddess Yuxian, was shot down by Gilgamesh during the battle between the Legion of Lung and the Legion of Giants. Princess Sisela didn't know about this, but she felt surprised and wronged. Did Cynic send such a person to pick her up to give her a show of strength? As a princess, she had never been treated like this before. The enchanting Princess Sisela was charming, but the female giant Iwu didn't have the slightest bit of tenderness for the fairer sex. Under her supervision, Princess Sisela entered the house made of cedar wood. Hot water was already prepared in the back hall, and palace maids were standing by the big wooden tub with clothes and brand new accessories. Iwu said with a straight face, "Your Highness, please take a bath and change your clothes." Her tone left no room for negotiation. As soon as the door was closed, she ordered the princess to take off her clothes and everything on her body, including her accessories. As the princess bathed, the female giant stared at her like a tiger watching its prey. She even ordered the princess to remove all her clothes and accessories, not even her earrings. Princess Sisela's charming body was like a perfect work of art. Her fair skin was sprinkled with roses, and the petals of her petals glowed in the warm water. It was as if she was the most charming man in the world. Even the palace maids who served her in the bath were admiring her. But Iwu's gaze was as if she was looking at a block of wood. She kept staring at the princess's private parts, giving her goosebumps. When the princess was finally done with her bath and grooming, She changed her clothes into brand new clothes prepared by the Assyrian Empire. Although they were luxurious, it was obvious that the Assyrian Empire was wary of the princess. He wouldn't allow the princess to hide anything that could be used to assassinate him. Fortunately, after the bath and dinner, Iwu didn't feel too embarrassed. Princess Sisela didn't ask where her clothes and accessories went. Only the ornaments on her nails were still there. The next day, they set off again for Lizzie. Princess Sisela was still sitting in the same carriage, but the guardian hero was no longer Metatro riding a white horse, but Ili, the female giant walking with her head held high. When the carriages entered Lizzie, there was a grand welcoming ceremony. The Assyrian Empire personally came out to welcome them. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Princess Sisela alighted from the carriage and walked towards Sinek. Her dress fluttered in the wind, and her charming face and slender figure were like the petals of a flower in the morning breeze. Even Seneca's eyes lit up. Sinek had long heard that Princess Sisela was a famous beauty in the Babylon kingdom. Due to her identity, such rumors were often exaggerated. But this was the first time he saw Princess Sisela in person. He didn't expect her to be even more beautiful than the rumors said. Sinek couldn't help but recall the scene before the year of harvest. At that time, he saw the valiant and heroic Samir on the battlefield for the first time. It was also indescribably breathtaking, as if all the beauty and elegance in the world had been stolen by that woman. But the Lady Sisela before him had a completely different temperament from Samir. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he wouldn't have believed that the beauty of a woman could reach two completely different extremes. Princess Sisela was delicate, like a gentle breeze blowing her fragrance. She made people want to spoil her, but at the same time, they wanted to tear her apart. She greatly aroused the desire of a hero to conquer and possess her. Sinek couldn't help but sigh with the feeling of being the ruler of the world. Only a great emperor like him could have such a vast territory and such beauty. While Sinek was immersed in his thoughts, Princess Sisela gracefully walked up to him and bowed. "Your Majesty, I'm here." Her voice was pleasing to the ear. There was a tinge of fear and bitterness in her timid voice. Sinek helped her up and held her arm. "My princess, the future empress of the empire. I've been waiting for you for a long time. Everyone has been waiting to welcome you, to praise your beauty and my achievements." Princess Sisela grinned. "I've been a little worried before I came. The rumors on the continent say that you're terrifying. But now that I've seen you in person, I can't believe you're so handsome and mighty." Her smile was so natural and charming that it could melt gold and iron. It made Seneca's heart bloom with joy. Sinek held the princess' hand and boarded a luxurious carriage. Escorted by the guards, they passed through the city and received the worship of the people. Naturally, there were many people in the city who followed the emperor's orders to welcome them. They sang songs of praise and cheered. But there were also many people who knelt on both sides of the street. Most of them were peasants who built the new capital. Many of them were slaves who were conquered and moved here. They were former citizens of the Babylon kingdom. Their prayers and kneeling were not out of coercion. They were completely spontaneous and sincere. Some of them even had tears in their eyes. They didn't walk towards Sinek, but towards Princess Sisela. They knew very well why Princess Sisela married Sinek. When Sinek saw this, he laughed in the carriage and said, "My princess, do you see these people? In the near future, you will become the revered Queen of Babylon." Princess Sisela smiled sweetly. "I only hope that your Majesty will treat them well, just like how you treat your people." "When you become my queen, and then the Queen of Babylon, the people of Babylon will naturally become my subjects," Sinek said proudly. The carriage passed through the city and arrived in front of the magnificent palace. Princess Sisela pouted her pink lips, showing a look of dissatisfaction. "My princess, what's wrong?" Sinek asked in a puzzled tone. "Your Majesty, are you going to hold your wedding here?" Princess Sisela asked in a coquettish tone. "Of course it's here," Sinek replied. "Lys is the capital I built, and this palace is also prepared for you. The chief priest of the empire will preside over the ceremony and confer you the title of queen. Is there anything you're not satisfied with?" Princess Sisela hugged Seneca's arm with one hand, showing a pitiful and aggrieved expression. She pointed at the unfinished buildings around the palace square with the other hand. The palace is very beautiful. Thank you, Your Majesty. But it's still in ruins. How can the great Emperor Cynic marry the queen in such a place? Cynica's face darkened. The craftsmen are too slow. Do you want me to punish them? I can behead the person who built the project and replace them with a group of capable slaves. Princess Sisela covered her mouth and exclaimed, Your Majesty, are you going to kill someone on the day of the wedding? No, that will only spoil the atmosphere. Then what do you want to do? Cynic asked. Princess Sisela hugged Cynica's arm with both hands, pinching his arm with her jade-like fingers. Your Majesty, to be able to marry a hero like you is the dream of every woman on the continent. How can the invincible Emperor Cynic confer the title of queen in a half-built house? I wonder if Your Majesty has heard of my hobby. Perhaps you should hold the ceremony in a tent that symbolizes the conquest of the continent. Cynic was taken aback for a moment, then he smiled. I've long heard of your hobby. You like to disguise yourself and travel around the kingdom. You also like to go hunting in the wilderness. That's my hobby as well. Hunting is a form of training for heroes in times of peace, but war is another form of hunting. Do you want me to set up the most luxurious tent in the world and hold the wedding in the hunting grounds? Princess Sisela smiled happily, her body softly leaning on Cynica's arm. The entire continent is Your Majesty's hunting grounds. Your wedding must show that you are a peerless hero. Cynic slapped his thigh. Very well then. I will confer the title of queen in the hunting grounds and hold a hunting feast. Let everyone celebrate this grand occasion. Hunting was a way for noble warriors to show off their martial prowess during times of peace. Emperor Cynic was also a keen hunter, and Princess Sisela's proposal was just what he liked. With Cynica's status, he could hold the wedding as he wished. The reason he made this decision was because the palace was not yet finished, but also because he liked it. Chapter 246. The first was that Princess Sisela would smile at him, and she looked so happy. It was completely different from the forced smiles of the concubines around Cynic. Her smile was as natural as a blooming flower. Cynic himself was also a supreme warrior. It was said that the sword he wielded on the battlefield was covered with a layer of bloody light. It could be seen that his murderous aura was very strong. Moreover, he was famous for his brutality. When the concubines saw him, their legs and stomachs would cramp. It was difficult for them to laugh even if they wanted to. The second was that Princess Sisela would get angry at him and express her dissatisfaction. Her anger and dissatisfaction were different from the coldness of Queen Samir. It was a woman's petulance. As an emperor, Cynic had many beauties at his beck and call, but none of his concubines dared to be so petulant with him. She even dared to express her dissatisfaction towards the specially built palace. And Princess Sisela had such a good sense of propriety. Her words just happened to make Cynic happy. Even if Cynic owned the world, it was almost impossible for him to meet a woman like her. He had found a long-lost feeling between a man and a woman. It felt so good. There was only one word to describe Princess Sisela in his arms. Aman and Gilgamesh hoped that Princess Sisela would find a chance to lure Cynic to the wilderness. Little did they expect that the princess would settle the matter as soon as she met the Emperor of Assyria. Princess Sisela didn't ask Cynic when the wedding would be held. She knew that the Emperor would definitely make an announcement. She also didn't suggest the location of the hunting feast. It seemed like the Emperor had decided everything himself. No one would know about it in advance, so naturally, they wouldn't be too cautious. If Cynic really did set up camp in the hunting ground, then he would marry Princess Sisela. The security would be tight. But that was not something that the princess could worry about. If someone wanted to assassinate the Emperor, she would have to deal with it herself. She could only pray silently in her heart. The reason why she lured Cynic to the wilderness was that it was impossible to assassinate the Emperor in the city. The army of the Assyrian Empire was stationed in the city of Lis, and the area around the palace was the most heavily guarded. Not only were there guards on duty, but there were also court priests who were always on alert. Even if a master could sneak in, the slightest movement would cause them to be surrounded by the army. It would be extremely difficult to escape. If that happened, it would not be an assassination, but a war. Even if they could find an opportunity to attack, the battle between masters could easily hurt innocent civilians. The situation would be out of control. As a god, Amon was also planning to participate in this matter. This was also related to the plan he had discussed with Marduk. He could take this opportunity to show his strength and let Enlil see what he was. Gods were different from mortals, and even level 9 oracles. In a sense, they were just a condensation of body and mind, so some of their feelings were different from those of mortals. For the gods, the killing formation of thousands of soldiers and horses was a very special place. Ordinary soldiers seemed vulnerable, but the killing intent of the tens of thousands of soldiers could more or less affect the physical and mental senses of the gods. As for how strong or weak it was, it depended on the morale of the soldiers in the formation. Although the disturbance was very weak and not enough to cause any harm, it had to be taken into account when fighting a master. So the gods would try to avoid such an occasion as much as possible. If it was in the wilderness, the situation would be different. Even if Seneca's security was tight, the hunting ground was just a form of entertainment, not a real war. Seneca could not bring the entire army stationed in the city, so he could only bring the palace guards and the masters around him. Gilgamesh or Amon could only use a surprise attack to end the battle quickly. When the time came, there would inevitably be a fierce battle between the top masters in the world. Seneca was very decisive. The ceremony of conferring the title of empress was set for 2 days later, and he ordered the preparations to be made immediately. Although the officials of the Imperial Ministry of Interior thought that it might not be in line with the etiquette of the empire, they could not go against Seneca's will. Of course, an emperor had to consider safety when traveling. Someone reminded Seneca to be careful of Amon, because Ammonius first became famous on the continent because of his surprise attack and capture of Hittite King Wuxia. Seneca laughed when he heard the words. "Do you think I'm going to let go of that useless Wuxia? Besides, how would people know that I'm going to marry Princess Sisela in the hunting ground? You're loyal to your duty, so go and make the arrangements." Seneca was different from Wuxia. He was a supreme warrior who had personally led the army and killed countless enemies. Moreover, he decided to hold the ceremony in the hunting ground on the spur of the moment. No one knew about it beforehand, not even he himself. Princess Sisela only made a suggestion. She did not ask Seneca where the hunting feast would be held. However, she knew that the most suitable place for a large group of people to hold the feast would be the Lizi River Valley in the northwest of the city. There were deep mountains connected to the hills, grassy slopes in the valley, and shrubs in the northwest. Deep in the mountains was a primeval forest with lush vegetation and many wild beasts. It had now been designated as the royal hunting ground of Emperor Seneca. The grassy slopes in the valley were perfect for setting up camp. Princess Sisela could even roughly guess where to set up camp. Only an open grassy slope would be the most suitable. Why was she so clear about the situation here? Because the princess's fief was in the city of Lizi. The hunting ground used to belong to her. Years ago, when Gilgamesh sent Humbaba's fangs and tendons to the capital of Babylon, the little duke even invited him to Lizi to hunt. It was in that place. 2 days later, Princess Sisela had changed into her hunting attire. Escorted by the imperial guards, she left the city in a grandiose manner and headed for the hunting grounds. Princess Sisela sat in the carriage, while Seneca rode in front of the procession on a pure black warhorse. The entourage included the important officials in Lizi, many of whom were civil officials. However, to please Seneca, they all changed into warrior attire, except that they did not wear heavy armor. As for the guards, they were of course quite strong. 500 elite imperial guards were dispatched. Not only the supreme warrior Crips, but also 4 supreme warriors of the imperial generals who participated in the hunting. They were the generals of the imperial legions, and happened to be in Lizi. Of course, they had to attend the hunting feast of Emperor Seneca. Including Seneca himself, there were 6 supreme warriors in the procession. However, Samir, the most powerful warrior on the continent and Seneca's other queen, was not present. Samir stayed in Lizi and did not participate in the hunting feast. Perhaps she was unhappy, but her reaction was normal. There were also 3 supreme mages in the hunting party. In addition to the court supreme mage White, There was also a chief priest of the Straw League, one of the high priests of the Assyrian kingdom, Diego Jorge, who happened to be in Lisi as well. The most powerful of all the mages was, of course, Faust, the sage of the nation. There were not only warriors in the king's imperial guards, but also a group of court priests. Their duty was not only to protect Emperor Cynic and Empress Sicilla, but also to hold the conferring ceremony under Faust's leadership. This group of priests was probably more powerful than a single supreme mage. There were 30 of them, specially trained and equipped with standard staffs. They could form a magic formation to guard against any surprise attack at a critical moment. Their commander used to be white, but today he was replaced by Faust. When the emperor went hunting, the group of priests who accompanied him were also given scrolls. This was also part of their strong fighting power. Scrolls could not be used on a large scale on a battlefield, as they were too expensive and could easily cause accidental injuries in a chaotic battle. However, they were a regular magical item when protecting the emperor, especially in the wilderness. They were perfect for setting up a magic formation and being used in batches. They had all kinds of miraculous offensive and defensive effects. In order to prevent any unexpected situations, Faust had also ordered all the scrolls provided by the group of imperial priests to be stored in his own space ring. If there were any sudden incidents, he could command the priests to immediately set up a formation and use the scrolls in the formation. In the face of such a powerful force, it was simply impossible to assassinate Cynic. It was Princess Sicilla who managed to lure Cynic to the hunting ground. But when she saw the formation, she regretted it and even secretly prayed that Gilgamesh would not come. Some people had already set up camp on the grassy slope between the hills. In the middle of the camp was a luxurious leopard skin tent. The tent was like a small palace. The front part of the tent was open, with seats for Cynic and Princess Sicilla, and a separate seat for Faust next to it. There were also many tents in front of the tent, forming an open space with tables and cushions. This was where the hunting feast and the conferring ceremony would be held. As for the tent at the back, it would be the bedroom of Cynic and Princess Sicilla after their marriage. When the crowd arrived, everything had already been prepared. Cynic was now a man of action, and a large-scale hunting party was about to begin. The emperor rode a warhorse with a longbow in his hand and galloped into the wilderness. His guards flanked him from both sides, neither too far nor too close. Princess Sicilla did not ride a horse. She sat in a chariot and followed Cynica's horse from afar, cheering and jumping for joy. The driver was the female giantess Idamit. Little did Princess Sicilla know that the female giantess in front of her was the most powerful being among them. She waved her embroidered handkerchief and shouted, "Your Majesty, be careful. Ever since the great flood in the plains of Duk, monsters have been appearing in the deep mountains here." Cynic laughed and said, "I can't wait for a monster to rush out and kill it myself in front of you." Serving the emperor on a hunting trip was a tough job. Not only did they have to protect His Majesty from being hurt by the beasts, but they also had to let His Majesty have fun and show off his power by killing the beasts. Fortunately, Cynic himself was a supreme warrior. Ordinary beasts could not hurt him at all, which saved him a lot of trouble. In fact, some warriors and priests had already arrived at the forest in front of them. They were hard at work carrying out two tasks. One was to check if there were any assassins lying in ambush in the mountains, and the other was to drive the beasts out of the mountains. Otherwise, the beasts would have been scared away by such a huge commotion in the wilderness. How could Cynic continue his hunt? Cynic was indeed brave. He drove the frightened beasts out of the forest, and his arrows did not miss their target. He killed 5 deer, 3 antelopes, a leopard and 2 bears in a row. The warriors on both sides of him also had their own kills. The grand hunt finally came to an end when the horses were tired, and their nostrils were puffing white smoke. The game was transported back to the camp, washed and cooked before being served at the banquet. The tired officials escorted Cynic out of the wilderness and back to the camp. If someone wanted to assassinate Cynic, the most dangerous moment had passed. Most of the guards in charge of security were relieved. Sigh. It was already afternoon. The ceremony to confer the title of Empress would be held before sunset, followed by a grand bonfire banquet. Princess Sisela sat in her chariot and looked up at the sky. The expression in her eyes was either disappointment or relief. It seemed that the assassin had given up on the plan. Even the princess herself could not tell if she wanted Gilgamesh to come out or not. Just then Eli, who was driving the chariot, suddenly turned his head to the east in the direction of the Lys River. Everyone immediately looked in that direction because they heard the clopping of hooves. It was a strange situation. Unless there were tens of thousands of horses galloping, the sound of hooves from a single horse could not be heard from so far away. But this knight had used a kind of magic, fearing that no one would know of his arrival. Everyone, including Cynic, had a strange expression on their faces. They were not nervous, but more curious. A small dot appeared on a hill in the distance. But with the eyesight of the experts, they could clearly see that it was a warrior on horseback. This person was riding a pure white horse, with a golden shield in his left hand and a golden spear in his right. He wore a bright silver armor and a fiery red cloak fluttered in the wind. There was a smile at the corner of his mouth, and the sunlight shone on his handsome face and mighty figure, making him look so energetic. Bows were nocked, swords were unsheathed, and the priests took out their staffs, ready to face the enemy. Sinak smiled and waved his hand to indicate that there was no need to be so nervous. He shouted to the newcomer, "Which hero has come to my hunting ground? If you are here to congratulate me on my wedding with Princess Sisela, I will pardon your trespass. Throw away your weapons and dismount, and you can join my hunting feast." Princess Sisela's heart was in her throat when she saw a godlike knight appear in the distance. But when the man came close enough for her to see clearly, she realized that it was Metatro. She couldn't help but feel surprised and disappointed at the same time. Medanzo replied in a loud voice, "My name is Medanzo and I come from Shirling." "Cynic, I'm not here to drink, I'm here to kill you." While answering, Medanzo had already galloped forward on his horse. He bent his upper body slightly forward, raised his shield in his left hand, and pointed the golden spear in his right. He was only one man and one horse, but he was in a charging stance. The sound of hooves echoed across the grassland, as if thousands of horses were galloping. Medanzo was still quite a distance away. He dashed down a hillside and then disappeared. His line of sight was blocked by a small hill. When he galloped up the hill again, his shield was already shining with golden light, making him look like a majestic god. He was really bold, so bold that there was no limit to his boldness. He actually dared to charge at so many experts. Cynic was on his way back to the camp. Some of the guards had already returned to the camp in advance to prepare for the ceremony and the feast. There were about 200 guards with him. Except for Krips, the commander of the guards, the other 4 supreme warriors were also present. Medanzo's action was both surprising and amusing, but no one dared to be negligent. 2 supreme warriors led dozens of riders to meet him, followed by the supreme mage Diego Joao, who was holding his staff high. They were the head of the legion, the commander of the vanguard, and the chief priest. They were already very familiar with each other. At this moment, it was a good opportunity to show off in front of His Majesty. Medanzo seemed to be in a charging stance, but when he was about to reach the battle range, he suddenly changed. He threw the golden shield in his hand out like a battle axe, and at the same time, leaped high from the back of his horse and swung down with all his might in midair. The shield was blocked by 2 rays of sword light in front of the cavalry formation, exploding into a ball of golden light, and shattering into pieces. The supreme mage Diego Joao also sacrificed a ray of light to cover the charging warriors. Dozens of spears whistled into the air. A golden ray of light fell from the sky, as if separating light and darkness. A powerful momentum swept away the flying spears and hit the light of the guard formation. The light was shattered, and the 2 supreme warriors roared and leaped high. 2 arcs of sword light crossed to block the golden light, but at this moment, they heard the neighing of horses. The attack from the sky was blocked, and the warriors could still bear the aftermath of the energy, but the horses under them could not bear it and fell to the ground. Shinnok shouted, "This man is the general of Lung, be careful of the weapon in his hand, kill him." After saying that, he pulled out his sword and urged his horse to rush over. As soon as His Majesty moved, the whole formation moved. The guards were divided into 2 wings, and under the leadership of the 2 supreme warriors, They also moved to outflank the king. The court supreme mage White flew above the king in midair, and threw 2 scrolls from afar. Wild wind blades erupted, and the sky was filled with blurry light. Madanzo waved his golden spear, and drew a circle in the air. An invisible energy shield appeared in the air, blocking the opponent's attack. He somersaulted in the air, and landed on the ground. At this time, a large group of people had rushed over and formed a battle formation. Chapter 247. Notice of welcoming the New Year's storytelling event. Ever since Dubhe was released, I've been plagued by all sorts of miscellaneous matters. Sometimes I can't help but sigh. Why are there only 24 hours in a day? These past few years, I've often been busy. Perhaps I've developed a kind of tenacity to persevere in a stable state. I suddenly remembered that it's been a long time since I've storytold, and it's almost the end of the year. December 31st, Saturday, 7 p.m. sharp. Welcoming the New Year's storytelling event will be held on the Gentleman's Residence YY channel. Another year has passed. Everyone can gather on the internet to be lively. I'll be storytelling. Enthusiastic readers can sing, tell jokes, and perform all sorts of other talents. Interested readers can inquire about the specific method of participation in the book club. See the pinned announcement in the book review section for how to join the book club. In addition, the annual selection has already begun. There's an announcement on the homepage. There's also a voting option right below the title of the book on the homepage. Ordinary users will each have 1 free ticket. 6 users will each have 2 free tickets. I'm asking for everyone's votes here. Due to the limited number of votes, please focus your votes on the Book of the Year Dubhe. As for the Author of the Year, I don't need to vote. I'm only asking for everyone's free tickets. There's no need, and it's not worth it for you to spend your money on paid tickets. If you really have that kind intention, you might as well give me a tip. I'm already very grateful for the support of the official subscription. Asking for tickets isn't for any title, but a form of acknowledgement. It's almost the end of the year. Based on the principle of free tickets, let's all be lively for once finally. A grand and formal request. This month's and this year's final closing monthly tickets. Chapter 248. In the distance, Princess Sisela couldn't help but cry out in alarm. She looked very anxious. She was very worried about Metatro's safety, and at the same time, she secretly blamed this brave warrior for being so reckless. He simply wanted to be in the limelight without caring about his life. Madanzo didn't show the slightest trace of fear. Amidst the battle cries of the crowd, an ethereal song was suddenly heard. It was sung in a language that no one could understand, but it was indescribably beautiful. Dozens of galloping horses suddenly knelt on the ground, and the knights were caught off their horses. White, who was flying in the air, shouted, "This is a sonic phantom attack. There are assassins in the north." The mages chanted in unison. Prayers dispelled the influence of the song, and many warriors came back to their senses. Just now, some of them had dropped their weapons when they heard the song. The battle formation of the palace guards was a little chaotic. Only the masters remained clear-headed. Madanzo had already landed in the distance. He stood there with his golden spear in hand. Suddenly, a strange scene appeared in the forest in the north. It was clearly a mountain, but it seemed to have turned into a sea. A blue wave was pouring down, and there were 3 people standing on the top of the wave. No, it should be 2 people and an upright monster. The monster had the head of a fish and the body of a human. It swung its tail rapidly to stimulate the wave. Behind it stood 2 supreme mages with staffs in their hands. They were Goliath and his student Walter. As for the monster, it was naturally Sylvia's summoned beast Rulio. The 3 of them had actually come, and they had even formed a small battle formation. Seeing the wave rushing towards them from afar, many warriors tried to hide in fear. At this moment, they heard a buzzing sound from the staffs, and the phantoms in their souls were broken. It turned out that everything was just an illusion, but the 3 of them had already appeared on a steep slope in the north. They were very fast, and they had come from the deep forest. As soon as Seneca's hunt ended, The guards in the mountains naturally retreated, but the three of them immediately rushed out. As soon as the illusion of the waves broke, Goliath and Walter raised their staffs at the same time. Countless spiraling wind blades shot out, diverting the rain of arrows. Rulio, on the other hand, brandished a serrated long sword, and a transparent blade aura surged towards the Assyrian imperial guards like a flying wave. The two supreme warriors swung their swords at the same time, and the arc of light cut through the transparent sawtooth blade. The imperial guards pulled out their swords. Their blades were engraved with flowery script. Amidst the chanting of the heavenly officials, they formed a formation of swords that looked like a well. It was as if they were an impenetrable fortress. The dazzling appearance of Madanzo and the sneak attack of Goliath and the other two completely attracted everyone's attention. At this time, Ife shouted, "Watch out to the south!" At this time, an assassin appeared silently from a third direction. Just as Rulio swung his serrated sword, a lonely figure suddenly appeared from the south of the hunting ground. He was wearing a coarse linen robe and had worn boots. He held a warrior's longbow in his hand and carried a quiver of arrows on his back. He nocked an arrow and shot it from a distance. The arrow was silent, as if it could pierce through space. It whistled when it got close. The guards behind Sinak were caught off guard, and the shockwave caused by the arrow sent them tumbling. Then, there was a loud bang, and a white light rushed out of the void, shattering the arrow. The magic formation formed by the heavenly officials had neutralized the arrow's attack. Then the white light burst out in succession, making rhythmic banging sounds. Gilgamesh did not just shoot one arrow, but steadily moved forward and shot a series of arrows. He strode on the grassland, not too fast or too slow, leaving a line or two of deep footprints behind him. Madanzo was the first to charge, followed by Galier and Gilgamesh, one in the open and one in the dark, from the north and south. When Gilgamesh shot a series of arrows, Madanzo waved his golden spear and rushed into the battle formation again, while Rulio did not stop once he swung his sword. The fierce battle had already begun. Powerful assassins appeared from three directions at the same time, but the guards did not panic under the restraint of Sinak. 200 imperial guards, 4 supreme warriors, 3 supreme mages, and a group of court mages seemed to form an impregnable battle fortress in the wilderness. They did not disperse to launch a counterattack, but advanced in the direction of Madanzo. 2 supreme mages prayed for the warriors in the battle formation, and the weapons used by the imperial guards were all blessed with magic. The light connected together, like a moving, murderous wall, and the great formation of mages commanded by Faust firmly guarded the battlefield, making up for every flaw in the defense, and could also launch a counterattack. The most magnificent battle scene appeared on Madanzo's side on the west side. The attack of the Key of Destiny in his hand was beyond people's understanding, and could not be diverted at all. It was like the test of fate, and in a head-on battle, it could only be resisted head-on. The golden light was like a dazzling bolt of lightning that slashed down from all directions, but he was fighting and retreating. Because the opponent's battle formation was moving rapidly in his direction, Madanzo could never resist it alone. At most, he could only restrain the attack while retreating. If there were no other people on either side to help, Madanzo would have been trapped by the enemy at this moment, and would not have been able to escape even if he had wings. The fiercest battle took place on the north side. Rulio's blade was almost transparent, and with a wave of power, it was far less magnificent than the golden light of Madanzo's spear. But behind him was Goliath and Walter, who were operating magic to protect him from the counterattack, while increasing the power of his attacks. The Imperial Guard's battle formation on this side burst out a series of flashes from time to time, creating a state of intense anxiety. The calmest battle took place on Gilgamesh's side in the south. He simply walked over from afar, continuously shooting arrows. Every time he got closer, the power of his arrows would increase by a fraction as he silently shot them out. Only when they reached the front of the battle formation did they let out a whistling sound, and were constantly smashed by the magic protection and the light of various swords, leaving only bursts of energy shock waves. Princess Sisela finally saw Gilgamesh. His appearance was so simple, and he kept shooting plain arrow after plain arrow at the enemy. Sisela felt an inexplicable warmth in her heart. She could no longer hear the sounds of the fierce battle, and could only stare blankly at Gilgamesh approaching from afar. She opened her mouth to shout something, but her throat seemed to be blocked. In the ambush of three fronts, Madanzo's side was clearly at a disadvantage, while Rulio's side was evenly matched. Only Gilgamesh was advancing step by step. But the guards on Sinaka's side had yet to display their greatest fighting strength. Faust had commanded the court guards to deploy a magic formation, only to stabilize the situation and protect his majesty. Sinak himself had drawn his sword, the blade faintly emitting a blood-red light, but he had yet to make a move. Flying Bull Shani leaned against the carriage, staring at the approaching Gilgamesh, his pupils gradually contracting. In the distant camp, Krips had already led 300 Imperial guards towards them on horseback. Sinak used a magic signal to order them to outflank Goliath and Walter. It seemed that the stalemate would soon be reversed. If these assassins did not hurry up and flee, they would not be able to escape. To succeed in an assassination, the most important thing was to succeed in a sneak attack. If one failed, they would have to flee 1,000 miles away. Facing a battle formation head-on like this was already a failure for the assassins. Sinek gripped his sword and sneered. He was thinking about which assassin to behead first. Ili did not care about the outcome of the battle, nor did she care whether the assassins would succeed in assassinating Sinak. She only watched Gilgamesh's movements. There were only 12 arrows in Gilgamesh's quiver. Based on his shooting speed and distance, he would run out of arrows in less than a third of the way. When the last arrow in Gilgamesh's hand left the bowstring, Iguan also shot up from the carriage like an arrow leaving the bowstring. He let out a deafening roar in midair, and brandished a strange weapon in his hand. It looked like a long prism, but it was twisted into a spiral arc. It also looked like a curved blade with two sharp strings on both sides. Its shape was very similar to a strange bull's horn that had been polished and elongated. When this weapon was brandished, it gave off a soul-shaking sound. A spiral storm surged out of the air and swept towards Gilgamesh's figure. Gilgamesh had once shot down her twin sister, the heavenly bull goddess Yuxian, with one arrow. Ili was waiting for him. Not only did this attack carry great power, but it also contained an angry imprisonment. She wanted to wrap Gilgamesh in the center of the storm and prevent him from escaping. Gilgamesh threw away the longbow after shooting the last arrow. If one was close enough, they could see that he was wearing a pair of boxing gloves. They were carefully made from the toughest snakeskin of Humbaba. Enkidu also had a pair of the same boxing gloves. His boxing gloves shone with a faint golden light, but the aura of power was different from that of a pure warrior like Enkidu. With a low hum, it contained a strange magic. It was as if there was an invisible armor spreading along the boxing gloves and covering his whole body. If he swung his fist, not only would there be a powerful impact, but there would also be an instantaneous high-level magic. He was ready to swing his fist to meet the storm falling from the sky. However, at this moment, there was another unexpected change. Gilgamesh had only swung his fist halfway when he suddenly turned his wrist and grabbed a longbow. It was the famous divine bow that he had forged with his own hands. This bow had been given by Gilgamesh to Amon, and Amon had given it to Madanzo for safekeeping. At this moment, it was back in his hands. Gilgamesh turned his wrist and held the bow in his hand, just in the posture of shooting an arrow. Then he pulled the bowstring and pulled out an arrow from the bowstring out of thin air. This was not an arrow condensed from energy. This time, he had come to assassinate Emperor Sinek. Under his linen sleeves, there was a bracelet. It was this supreme mage's spatial artifact. This arrow was drawn from the bracelet. It was about 3 feet long, and the white shaft was filled with a terrifying aura. There were strange veins on the body of the arrow that seemed to be flowing. Without the feather, it was just a bare shaft. There was also no arrowhead. The tip of the shaft was naturally pointed, making it look extremely sharp. This was Humbaba's tusk. It should have been curved, but Gilgamesh had refined it into such an arrow. The spine of Gilgamesh's divine bow was refined from Humbaba's gugu, and the bowstring was made from Humbaba's snake tendon. As soon as the arrow was placed on the bowstring immediately made a strange vibration. It sounded like an angry roar, but also like a wail of pain. The sound of thousands of wild bulls roaring could be heard in the wilderness. In an instant, this plain-looking warrior seemed to have become an indomitable god. Even the grassland around him became blurred under the powerful aura. The gauntlet glowed with golden light as he slowly pulled the bowstring. In midair, there seemed to be a phantom of a 9-headed serpent. Faust's expression immediately changed. This was because Gilgamesh was not aiming at the flying bull god in the sky, but at him, who was floating in midair in the distance and presiding over the magic formation. This series of unforeseen events happened at the same time. Gilgamesh drew his bow and nocked an arrow. The flying bull god rushed into the sky and fired a thunderstorm at Gilgamesh. However, Gilgamesh did not even raise his head. He did not pay any attention to the thunderstorm at all. This was because he heard a voice in his soul that he absolutely trusted. Gil, let me handle the matters in the sky. You deal with the magic formation with all your strength. This was the voice of God Amon, and the real sneak attack had only just begun. A long sword carrying the power of sealing slashed through the void, and the spiral-shaped storm was abruptly cut in midair before it could fully unfold. Following this slash, Ammonius also stepped out of the void with the Eye of Sealing in his hand. Since the divine emissary sent by Enlil had made his move, he the god, had finally appeared in person. Ammon cut the storm with one slash. He then swung his sword with a devouring power towards the flying bull god opposite him. The flying bull god waved his spiraling longsword, and a fierce storm rolled up in midair. He forcefully received Ammon's slash, and his figure flew backwards. At the same time, two figures suddenly rushed out from Seneca's guards into the sky. Accompanied by thick smoke and flames, they attacked Ammon from the left and right. In an instant, they formed a triangle in the sky. They were the two great generals under Enlil, the god of flames Kibir, and the god of ashes Nugus. Enlil had long anticipated that Ammon might come to assassinate Sinek, and had already set up an ambush in advance. However, Enlil did not expect that Ammon would make such a big move. Moreover, Faust and Princess Sisela were the real threats to the emperor. Fierce battles broke out in all directions at the same time, from the sky to the ground. The experts of the mortal world had no time to care about the battle between the gods. Gilgamesh's arrow had already been shot. This was the most powerful arrow he had ever shot in his life. No matter how sturdy an ordinary bow or arrow was, it would not be able to withstand such abundant magic power. The sharp whistling sound of the arrow instantly drowned out all the sounds of fighting on the battlefield. If Faust did not respond with all his strength, he would definitely be shot dead on the spot. The mages who had set up the formation were all shocked. At the same time, they mobilized their most powerful magic power. A brilliant light spread out, and a rainbow appeared in the sky. The whistling arrow shot into the rainbow, shattering the colorful halo layer by layer. Finally, it strangely froze in the air. The strong impact of the arrow did not dissipate, as if it was frozen in the viscous air. Outside the formation, the court supreme mage White shouted anxiously, "Master the scroll!" Then, a look of panic appeared on his face. The magic formation that had been enveloping the entire battlefield suddenly retracted its power, no longer protecting the warriors and King Sinek. Before Gilgamesh shot the arrow, Seneca's guards had been steadily gaining the upper hand. Although the assassins were attacking from 3 directions, the guards' formation was very tight, and they were only advancing rapidly towards Medanzo in the west. Faust led the team of palace clerics to lay down a divine spell formation that covered the entire battlefield. The weapons of the Imperial Guards were engraved with the inscriptions of the divine spell formation. Under the activation of the divine spell formation, the weapons were linked together like an impenetrable fortress. Their first duty was to protect His Majesty's Ankin, so they did not disperse and attack separately. In the distant camp, Cripps had already led 300 Imperial Guards to the rear of Goliath and the other 2, and would soon defeat the assassins. Goliath, Walter, and Rulio's retreat had been cut off, and Medanzo, who was in a bitter battle, could not escape either. Although Sinek was cruel, his command of the battle was not chaotic at all. Ely's attack was the first surprise. The Imperial Guards did not know the origin of this female giant, and did not expect her to be so powerful. Could it be that a god was hiding beside Emperor Sinek? The thunderous roar of joyful thunder as it soared into the sky, and the thunderstorm that spread out was so terrifying that the warriors facing Gilgamesh felt their minds being seized by it. Ammonius' appearance was the second surprise. He stepped out of the void, waved his sword, and cut off the thunderstorm, repelling Eli. Then, thick smoke and flames appeared in the sky, and a battle between the gods really began. The imperial guards facing the south almost forgot to breathe at this moment, and looked at the sky with an extremely shocked expression. No matter what kind of warrior they were, when they saw the gods fighting in the sky with their own eyes, they would always be in awe. Not everyone could be Enkidu. The third surprise was the Longfang arrow shot by Gilgamesh. Its power was unparalleled, and the whistling sound of it even drowned out the fierce battle of the gods in the sky. Its target was Faust, who was floating in the air. The court supreme mage White, who was floating above Cynic, was shocked. He subconsciously shouted for Faust, reminding the sage to use the scrolls. In fact, White had long wanted to remind Faust to use the scrolls, but he did not say it just now because there was no need. The assassins could not break into the battle formation, and the protection of the magic formation was very tight, so there was naturally no need to waste the defensive scrolls. Gilgamesh was still far away, so there was no need to use the offensive scrolls for the time being. But against Rulio and the others, they could use the high-grade offensive scrolls, which would save them a lot of effort. White used 2 high-grade scrolls to shoot down Madanzo from the air. Perhaps because the Imperial Guards had gained the upper hand, Cripps and his men were about to surround them. So Faust did not have to use the scrolls for now. But when Gilgamesh shot that arrow, White realized that the situation was not good. He did not think that the assassins could succeed, but seeing so many unexpected changes suddenly happen, he was worried that the situation would get out of control, and he reminded Faust to end the battle quickly. Unfortunately, his reminder was too late. It was too late to use the defensive scrolls to deal with Gilgamesh's arrow, and could only use the magic formation to activate the instantaneous magic. White's heart suddenly turned cold when he saw the arrow shattering the halos on the rainbow one after another, and finally being frozen in mid-air. This was because the divine spell formation formed by the team of palace priests and guards under Faust's command had suddenly broken away from the fierce battle. Chapter 249. The power of Gilgamesh's fanged arrow was so astonishing that even the powerful rainbow aura couldn't block it. Faust, in a moment of life and death, instantly activated his strongest defensive ability, the air elemental armor, and forcibly froze the arrow in the air. This kind of magic could solidify the surrounding air, turning the outer layer viscous until the inner layer was as hard as diamond. Moreover, Faust's operation of the magic formation was equivalent to concentrating the most powerful magic power of the 30 priests at the same time. With the instantaneous activation of the magic formation by a 9th-level supreme mage, its defensive ability was simply unstoppable. Although the air elemental armor was magical, there was an obvious limitation when using it. It would freeze the user in place. Before the magic effect disappeared, neither Faust, who was in the air, nor the priests on the ground could move. Naturally, Faust couldn't freeze all the warriors. He only used the air elemental armor to protect himself and the 30 priests in the formation, because their magic power was circulating together. Warda realized that the situation was not good. He immediately descended from the air and waved his staff frantically. Smoke and dust rose up from the south of the formation, and stones flew everywhere. In an instant, a layer of earth elemental wall formed from sand and mud appeared. He could see clearly that Gilgamesh didn't care about what was happening on the battlefield. He still stepped forward, drew his bow, and knocked another fanged arrow. This arrow could no longer hurt Faust, but Faust would become a target in the air. Warder, who had encountered the sudden change, didn't forget his duty. He instantaneously released magic to protect the formation, but as an 8th-level mage, he couldn't stop Gilgamesh's second fanged arrow at all. The cause and effect of this series of changes were very complicated to explain, but it all happened in the short time that Gilgamesh took 3 steps forward. The guards facing Gilgamesh were still looking up at the sky, dumbfounded. The magic formation connected to the defense of the formation suddenly disappeared. The light emitted by their weapons also disappeared, and a cloud of smoke and dust gushed out in front of them. Gilgamesh's second fanged arrow was shot horizontally toward Sennaca's position. No matter how many obstacles there were in the middle, it flew straight towards the target. With the sound of a huge wave, a hole appeared in the half-solidified earth elemental wall. The huge wave of impact swept 5 or 6 royal guards who could not react in time into the air. The speed of this fanged arrow did not slow down at all, and with a whistling sound, it arrived in front of Sennac. Sennac was indeed a supreme warrior who had killed countless enemies. He let out a strange roar, jumped from his horse, and swung his sword. Sennac's sword, glowing with a blood-red light, collided with the tip of the arrow. Time seemed to freeze for a moment, and then there was an explosion of blood. Cracks appeared on both the heavy sword and the long arrow, and a powerful shockwave erupted from the point of impact. Sennac's warhorse was sent flying, and the emperor himself was sent flying backwards. Even Enkidu would have to use his full strength to take this arrow from Gilgamesh. Although Sennac could block it, Sennac was still had. The most unlucky one was the supreme mage Wyatt. He had just cast the earth elemental wall, and fell from the air, when Sennaca's burly figure was sent flying by the explosion of a huge shock wave. The poor supreme mage could not use any instantaneous magic to harm his majesty, who he was supposed to protect. In a moment of hesitation, he was hit hard by Sennac, breaking his tendons and bones on the spot. He was the first to die. As soon as Sennac landed on the ground after knocking White away, he gripped his saber tightly. The southern and central lines of the formation were in chaos, but Gilgamesh didn't give him any chance to catch his breath. He immediately fired another arrow. This arrow was simply beyond the imagination of the people. Even a god like Amon had never seen such archery. If Gilgamesh had shot an arrow like this in the Battle of Kenmit, Amon might not have had the chance to become a god, because it would have been difficult for him to survive. With a twang of the bowstring, the divine art that shocked the world suddenly disappeared, leaving only a strong shock wave in the air. What Gilgamesh shot was not the fanged arrow, but himself. His figure shot out like an arrow, and before anyone could react, he shot himself into the enemy's formation through the gap created by the arrow just now. Just as Sennac stood still, Gilgamesh's arrow arrived. His glove flashed with golden light as he swung his fist. Even though Sennac had been through hundreds of battles, he had never experienced a situation like this. He hurriedly held his sword with both hands and slashed with all his might. Gilgamesh's fist hit the tip of the sword, and the glove, made of Humbaba's toughest snakeskin, cracked. Blood spurted from his white knuckles, and the sound of bones breaking could be heard. This punch also shattered Sennac's heavy sword, which was flashing with a bloody light. His body flew forward, and his fist landed on Sennac's chest. With a bang, Sennac's clothes from his chest to his chest turned into countless flying butterflies, accompanied by a flash of light, which was also mixed with flying fine armor pieces. The emperor was wearing a soft armor that also had the effect of divine magic, but it could not withstand Gilgamesh's attack. With a strange cracking sound, a large part of Sennac's chest caved in. He spat out a mouthful of blood, and was sent flying backwards. If Faust's grand priestly formation hadn't been frozen, then even if Gilgamesh had transformed himself into a sharp arrow, it would have been very difficult for him to reach Sennac in the center of the formation. But there were no ifs. Gilgamesh did not even spare the Assyrian emperor a glance after sending Sennac flying with a single punch. Instead, he leaped over Faust's head and landed right on the carriage that Princess Sisela was sitting in. Up until now, Princess Sisela had become a forgotten corner of the battlefield. But she had always been safe. Just a moment ago, Joy was guarding the front of the carriage, and she was protected by Faust's divine spell formation. But now, she had suddenly become free. Gilgamesh did not shake the reins or whip the horses, but the two horses neighed at the same time, as if they were stimulated by a powerful force. They galloped away at full speed. There were so many guards in Dasanak. How could they let Gilgamesh and Princess Sisela leave so easily? Everything happened too quickly, and it was hard to react in the middle of a fierce battle. Furthermore, the battle wasn't limited to just one place. Just as Gilgamesh shot the second tusk arrow, the divine formation under Faust's command froze and broke away from the battle. The Imperial guards who were fighting Rulio, and the other two did not even have time to react. The light on their weapons dimmed, and they lost the protection of the divine formation. But Gallier and the others seemed to have expected this. Rulio swayed in place and turned into a huge strange fish, spreading from the hill where he was to the ground under the guard's feet, as if it was instantly liquefied. The earth surged like waves, and the strange fish opened its mouth towards the sky, as if it was singing, but at the same time, it sounded like it was letting out a shrill cry. The scene before the eyes of the soldiers changed, as if they were standing on a wave. The four hooves of the horses and the feet of the warriors sank into the swamp-like ground. This was the innate skill of Rulio the mermaid. It might not have much effect on masters with strong minds and souls, but it was most suitable for large-scale attacks against ordinary warriors. If Faust was still operating the divine formation to cover the battle formation, the warriors would not be affected, but Faust was temporarily frozen in the air. The court supreme mage White could have cast a blessing magic to free the warriors from the illusion, but he happened to be killed by Sinak. Walter raised his staff to help Rulio, but Goliath flew to a low altitude and pointed his staff forward. The illusion created by Rulio turned into a real scene. The soil under the feet of the Imperial guards in front of them really seemed to have turned into a liquefied swamp. The soldiers and horses instantly fell down and cried out in alarm. The illusion created by the charm mermaid and Gallier's quicksand spell had a wonderful effect. Although earth elemental quicksand was very simple, it was cast at such a long distance and in such a large area. It softened the soil under the feet of the army, which showed the depth of Goliath's magic power. The magic used by a supreme mage may not be some brilliant or rare magic, but it was to make simple means have a magical effect that others could not. No one had ever seen Goliath charge directly into battle. Even if this supreme mage appeared on the battlefield, he was still the commander of the entire army. Today's action showed that the old man was also a top master in combat. Goliath did not fly high. He cast quicksand in the air, and then picked up his staff on the ground, rolling up a gust of wind with liquefied soil flying, and actually rolled up the weapons that the Imperial guards had accidentally dropped. The sharp tips shot backward like a rain of arrows in a certain direction. At this time, Gilgamesh's fist hit Seneca's chest. The burly figure of the great emperor flew straight back, and the swept weapons hit his back one after another. There was also a flash of light on his back. The armor actually had a defensive effect, bouncing off many of the swords and spears. Only 3 spears pierced into his body. Then Seneca fell to the ground with a loud bang, exhausted on the soil that had just become soft and then hard in an instant. Half of his body was buried. When Goliath launched this attack, Gilgamesh had already jumped into Princess Sisela's carriage and drove away. Faust, who was in the air, could only watch helplessly. Goliath did not continue fighting. He immediately threw out a flying spear and shot deep into the mountains with Rulio and Walter, ignoring the other situation on the battlefield. Then there was a scream of horror. "Your Majesty!" In another direction, there was still a battle. 2 supreme warriors and a supreme mage led dozens of Imperial guards to besiege Madanzo. Madanzo waved the key of fate and turned into rays of golden light. He was struggling to hold on, but at this time, a great change suddenly occurred in the rear of the battle formation. The supreme mage Diego Jojo sensed that something was wrong. When he turned around, he saw Seneca lying on the ground. The Imperial guards on the north and south sides also came to their senses. When they found that Seneca had been assassinated, they cried out in unison. They were instantly thrown into chaos. Madanzo took the opportunity to wave the key of fate. A golden light shot out from the top of his head and went straight behind him. He turned into a golden light and fled. The white horse he rode was still at the foot of the hill in the distance. Madanzo landed on the horse's back and urged it to gallop in the direction of the Lys River. All the assassins suddenly left, and none of them flew into the sky. Gilgamesh drove a carriage, Madanzo rode a horse, and even Goliath, who was controlling the flying spears, flew at a low altitude. The Imperial guards were in chaos. No one gave any orders. The panicked guards did not know whether to continue to guard Seneca or to chase the assassins in a certain direction. The supreme mage Diego Jojo stumbled to Seneca's side. At this time, a ray of light sprinkled down from the sky and fell on Seneca's body. Faust's voice was heard shouting, "Saving His Majesty is more important." The air elemental armor that froze the great formation of gods was finally undone. Although it was a short time, it seemed so long. When the great formation of wood was restored to its original state, everything was over. The light sprinkled on Seneca's body. His body floated up from the soil very smoothly. His sunken chest miraculously recovered to its original state. The 3 spears stuck in his back also seemed to be pulled out by an invisible hand, but there was no trace of blood. What a miraculous healing magic this was! Faust was operating the magic formation with all his strength. The bewildered imperial guards did not even dare to breathe at this moment. Diego Jojo cried out in surprise. "His Majesty is still alive." Seneca was indeed still alive. He spat out a mouthful of blood with his eyes closed, showing signs of life. Faust hurriedly shouted, "No one act rashly. His Majesty's current injury cannot be touched. We must operate the magic formation with all our strength to continuously heal him and stabilize his life." The Imperial Guards did not chase after anyone. Instead, they formed a defensive circle, protecting Seneca and the magic formation in the middle. Faust was chanting incantations. Various rays of light continuously fell on Seneca's body. Only the sage imperial advisor himself could tell how many mysterious methods had been used and how miraculous the healing effects were. From the looks of it, even the dead could be brought back to life, right? Everyone could only pray in their hearts. The supreme warrior Crips finally arrived at the battlefield with 300 imperial guards from the camp, but they were already too late. Diego Jojo shouted from afar, "Rein in your mounts. Everyone dismount. Don't shake the ground. Save His Majesty's life." Seneca's signs of life were so brittle and weak that even the shaking of the ground could kill him. How could Seneca still be alive? Gilgamesh was born with divine strength. Using the acceleration from the divine bow, he shot out like an arrow. His fist landed solidly on Seneca's chest, enough to collapse a small hill. Of course, there were 2 main reasons why he was still breathing. First of all, he was also a supreme warrior, and his sword had dissolved some of Gilgamesh's power. The soft armor he was wearing was probably the most precious magical armor on the continent, and it could disperse and deflect powerful impacts. But most importantly, Gilgamesh's punch did not aim to take Seneca's life. It shattered Seneca's strength and bones, turning the mighty Assyrian emperor into a cripple. Not to mention Faust, even the gods would not be able to heal this injury. He could not make another movement, nor could he say another word. Of course, this was also because Seneca's body was tough enough and his defense was strong enough. If it was someone else, they would have been smashed into a bloody pulp long ago. Gilgamesh was currently driving his carriage through the undulating plains, turning east towards the Lys River. Princess Sisela sat in the carriage, looking at Gilgamesh's back as if she was in a dream. As soon as Gilgamesh appeared, he shot 12 arrows in a row. Then, he shot another 2 arrows that pierced through the enemy's formation. Finally, he himself turned into an arrow and shot towards the center of the enemy's formation. Princess Sisela couldn't react at all. She didn't even see Gilgamesh send Seneca flying with a single punch. Then she saw the godlike Gil land on the carriage and take her and Exiner away. She subconsciously reached out her hand to touch her cheek. She could still feel it, but it didn't feel real. Even the 2 horses driving the carriage felt a little surreal. They couldn't possibly be running so fast. It was like a winged Pegasus. There was an invisible force pushing the carriage forward. It felt like the carriage was floating on water. Even though there were no pursuers, Gilgamesh still used magic to speed the carriage up. According to Amon's plan, they were to leave the battlefield as fast as possible after they succeeded. They were not to fly into the sky. The gods might interfere in this assassination. As for the gods, they would leave it to Amon and Amon to bring up the rear. The Lys River was right in front of them. Suddenly, the 2 horses felt their hooves and the carriage behind them sink. The strange force disappeared. The carriage slowed down abruptly. Princess Sisela, who was sitting in the carriage, was caught off guard and fell into Gilgamesh's arms with a cry. It turned out that Gilgamesh had turned around and stood up, hugging her. The princess's eyes were wet and her face was flushed as if she was drunk. Her cherry lips parted slightly as she murmured in his arms, "Gil." Gilgamesh reached out and gently sent her back to her seat. "Sit tight," he said in a low voice. Then, the hero steadied himself on the shaft of the carriage, raised his left arm towards the sky, and grabbed the divine bow out of thin air. Then, he put his right hand on the bowstring and pulled out a long-fanged arrow covered with strange patterns. Princess Sisela sat in the carriage and looked up at Gilgamesh. She seemed to be intoxicated. She looked like a love-struck fool. She didn't know what Gilgamesh was trying to do by pointing the bow at the sky. She didn't even have the heart to think about it. She only had eyes for him. Chapter 250. Smoke, flames, and storms were like a spiraling tsunami, trapping Ammonius in the sky. The god of flame, the god of ash, and the god of flying bull were exerting all their strength to fight Ammon. Ammon waved the eye of sealing, like a reef standing in the stormy waves, smashing the attacks of the three divine emissaries again and again. Not all 9th-level divine emissaries were good at this kind of battle. For example, Palanthos, whom Ammon was familiar with, may be the closest to the realm of immortality among all the divine emissaries of the Anunnaki divine clan, but she could never cope with this kind of situation. Among the generals under Enlil, the god of ash, the god of flame, the god of wind, the god of sky, the god of flying bull, and the god of dark wolf were the most powerful, especially the god of ash. Even ordinary gods would have a hard time dealing with him. Among them, the god of sky, Zhu Xian, had been shot down by Gilgamesh, and the god of dark wolf was Bright Moon Knight, who had assassinated Ammon. Seeing that the battle on the ground was over, Ammon did not want to continue fighting and quickly got away, but he was trapped by the three powerful divine emissaries. Especially the female giant Edam. She was simply crazy, and he had to beat back one of them to open a gap. If he wanted to end the battle quickly, Ammon would have to pay the price. His whole body was shrouded in a faint golden light, and he waved the eye of sealing in the thick smoke and raging fire, turning it into a power that seemed to be able to annihilate everything and slashed towards the god of flying bull. Ammon concentrated all his strength on one person, and the eye of sealing passed through the swirling thunderstorm, as if everything was still, and hit the spiral-shaped sword held by the god of flying bull. There was a sudden clap of thunder in the air, and Edam's burly figure was shaken back. Ammon did not relax his steps and slashed again with brute force. Ijun could not block it, but the attacks of the god of flame and the god of ash were not idle. With a bang, flames suddenly ignited outside the golden light shrouding Zamon's body, and he looked like a burning human-shaped fireball. Because of the continuous attacks of the god of flame, Ammon was finally ignited, when Yishuang had no time to defend. At this moment, Ammon had to withdraw his magic to extinguish the flames to avoid being hurt, but the Eye of Sealing still slashed towards Yishuang. With a loud crack, the Eye of Sealing cut off the tip of the spiral-shaped sword, and the surging power dispersed Yishuang's protective magic. The female giant somersaulted in retreat, and was abruptly cut down. Just as she was about to stabilize her body and switch positions with the Ash God in an attempt to avoid the continuous attacks, a long fang arrow flew diagonally towards her with a roar. That roar was so sharp that it seemed to have awakened the piercing pain in his soul. Then he felt nothing at all. Of sword of Ee of Zaman. Of dragon. Under normal circumstances, Ee might not be a match for Ammon, but under the continuous attacks of Ammon, she had already lost control of her body. Ammon did not even care about the attacks of the god of Ash, and swung his sword at her for the third time. No one knew if she could block the third sword, because Gilgamesh had already taken the opportunity to shoot her down. At the same time that Gilgamesh shot Eli, the raging flames that enveloped Ammon suddenly extinguished and turned into thick smoke. This was not extinguished by Ammon himself. He did not block the attack of the god of flame, and was immediately hit by the god of ash. The god of ash was the most powerful god's messenger under Enlil, especially when he worked together with the god of flame. They had a technique called terrifying ashes. Ammon could still use his magic to extinguish the burning flames. But when the god of ash extinguished the flames, It meant that all the energy of the attack was exhausted in an instant. It was a very strong injury that could cause a kind of permanent injury that was hard to recover from. Even a god would need to heal for a long time. What was even more frightening was that one would lose the strength to continue fighting. However, Aman seemed to have already prepared for this. Even without Gilgamesh's help, he would rather get injured in order to quickly escape. After Gilgamesh shot Eli, the flames on Aman's body extinguished and turned into thick smoke. He then swung the eye of sealing backhandedly, but it was not towards the enemy, but towards himself. The scene was shocking. Aman had cut himself in the middle like cutting vegetables. This was a technique that only a god could use, because mortals could not really cut themselves in half. Moreover, Aman had also borrowed the mystical eye of sealing in his hand. Two Aman appeared in the sky, one in front and one behind. The Aman in the front was unharmed, but the golden light on his body had dimmed a little. He turned into a golden meteor and shot towards the Lizi River. The Aman in the back had no golden light on his body, nor did he have a sword in his hand. His whole body was wrapped in thick smoke, and he turned into ashes in the thick smoke. Although Aman's method was incomparably magical, it also had the feeling of a venomous snake biting its hand, and a brave man cutting off his wrist. He was not injured, but he lost his magic power. He cut off the injury that had already been caused by the terrifying ashes, and at the same time, he escaped. Gilgamesh shot the last fanged arrow, and the divine bow in his hand fell to the ground. His body went limp, and he half knelt on the carriage, supporting himself with one hand as if he was very weak. Princess Sisela fell from her seat again, and held Gilgamesh in her arms. She asked anxiously, "Gil, what's wrong?" Gil stretched out his hand to support the princess's soft shoulders, and looked up at her with a smile. He panted and said, "I'm fine, just tired." Gilgamesh was tired. Today, as soon as he appeared, he shot out 12 consecutive arrows, and then shot out 2 earth-shattering tusk arrows. Finally, he turned himself into an arrow and shot into the enemy's formation, punching Sinak and sending him flying. When he shot the last arrow that killed Ife, he was already exhausted. Even though he was born with great strength and was a supreme mage of the 9th level, he could only sit on the carriage with the princess's help. The princess opened her arms and wrapped them around his waist. Although the carriage had slowed down, it was still running at a normal speed. The Lizi River was already in front of them. The horses that were pulling the carriage wanted to stop, but Gilgamesh gathered the last of his strength and snapped his fingers. 2 gusts of wind hit the horses' buttocks, and the 2 horses neighed and stepped into the water. However, they were lifted up by a strange force and floated on the surface of the water. This was not Gilgamesh's doing. The back of a huge ironback was vaguely visible under the water. It swam right under the carriage and crossed the river with the carriage. Elmar, the king of the ironbacks, was responsible for hiding in the Lizi River. Madanzo had already crossed the river on horseback, so there was no need for her help. Princess Sisela had no idea that the carriage was being carried by an ironback. Leaning on Gilgamesh's chest, she gazed at the village, the blue sky and the white clouds on the other side of the river. Somehow, she wished that the river could be wider so that the carriage could carry her and her lover on the gentle waves. This was the carriage of Emperor Sinek. It was in this carriage that Princess Sisela entered the city of Lizi to be worshipped by the people. When she returned to the other side of the Lizi River, there was no one else in the world except for Gilgamesh, who had just been rescued from the devil's claws. When the carriage arrived at the center of the river, Gilgamesh sat up straight and carried Sissi on his lap. He reached out his hand and caressed the back of Sissi's hand, then gently removed the poisonous shell and threw it into the river. He said gently, "I shouldn't have given it to you." Princess Sisela nestled in his arms. She pouted and her eyes were slightly red, but her face was full of happiness. She raised her hands in front of Gilgamesh's eyes and said, "And these, take them off too. I don't want them anymore." Gilgamesh had only removed one of the poisonous shells. The other nails of the princess were still decorated with shells, but now she wanted him to remove them all. Gilgamesh looked at her and reached out to remove all the beautiful shells. He flattened them and threw them into the river. Then the carriage finally set foot on the other side of the lazy river. As the carriage crossed the river, Amon also turned into a golden light and flew over the lazy river. The god of flame and the god of ash were stunned when they saw that the god of winged bull had been shot down, and Amon had escaped by damaging his own magic power. They then turned into flames and smoke and chased after Amon. Their bodies seemed to have collided with an invisible barrier above the Lys River, and abruptly came to a halt. A majestic voice sounded in their souls. Kibir Nugus, this is Marduk's divine realm. You shall not trespass. The god of flame shouted. Is Marduk protecting the assassin? The voice replied coldly. Marduk does not protect Amon, he only allows him to enter the divine realm. But he does not allow you and Imral's divine emissaries to cross the lazy river. Amon did not assassinate Sinek. He only stepped forward to block the attack of the god of flying bull. But you two had already laid an ambush and took the initiative to attack. This is a battle between gods. Seneca's death is only a battle between humans. How many people has he killed on the battlefield? If you say that you are protecting the murderer, are you going to blame Enrol? The one who spoke on the other side of the river should be one of Marduk's divine emissaries. Because of the war on the human world, although Marduk had been forced to retreat by Enrol, the west side of the lazy river was still Marduk's divine realm. Marduk did not allow them to enter, so the two divine emissaries could only look at the river and sigh. Amon was long gone. The carriage carrying Gilgamesh and Princess Sisela had also gone far away. He saw Metatro riding his white horse leisurely from upstream to the opposite bank of the river. The red cloak on his body was torn to shreds, but he still made a disdainful gesture to the god of flame across the river. Then the horse slowly rode away. Sinek was clearly still breathing, but the conversation of the divine emissaries made it seem like he had been assassinated. Perhaps in the eyes of the gods, it made no difference whether the great emperor was alive or dead at this moment. On the other side of the hunting ground, Faust was still operating the magic formation and casting various healing magic on Sinek. The guards were guarding him carefully and nervously in a circle. From a combat point of view, their losses were actually not that great. In total, they lost dozens of horses, and nearly 100 soldiers suffered varying degrees of injuries. If not counting Ely, the only one who died in the battle was the court supreme mage, White. But at this moment, it was meaningless to count the casualties, because the great Emperor Seneca's life was in danger, and the assassins had all retreated. In the history of the continent, there was no more perfect and amazing assassination than this. The sun had already set, and the sky was gradually darkening. Bonfires were lit all around. The light of the magic formation illuminated the empty space within the circle of guards, but the great Emperor Sinek was still lying in the center of the dazzling light. The magic formation was still operating. Many of the priests were sweating profusely. Their magic power was about to run out. Saving the great Emperor Seneca's life seemed to be even more difficult than fighting the assassins just now. But before Faust gave the order to stop, no one dared to stop. Even the guards in the surroundings did not dare to move. Currently, the imperial preceptor, Faust, was the highest-ranking official of the empire on the scene. All operations could only be commanded by him. Many people were secretly praying in their hearts, hoping that the imperial preceptor could save Seneka's life, even if it was only for a short period of time. Otherwise, if the great emperor was assassinated, according to the cruel laws of Sinek himself, the guards accompanying him would be severely punished. Faust was not only saving Sinek, he was also saving everyone present. After nightfall, some of the priests were already trembling, with traces of blood seeping from the corners of their mouths. It was spring, but there was a strong chill in the mountains under the curtain of night. The imperial guards who were guarding the surroundings inexplicably felt an irresistible fear in their hearts. They had never been so afraid, even when they were fighting and fighting. At this moment, there was a flash of fire and the sound of galloping horses coming from the southeast. From afar, someone shouted, "Her Majesty the Empress has arrived." It was an army carrying torches. They had rushed over from the city of Lys. Empress? Sinek had come to the hunting ground today to confer the title of Empress. The ceremony could no longer be held, and the hunting feast would never start. Princess Sisela was also taken away by the assassins, leaving only Cynic, who could die at any time. Now that the Empress had arrived, it could only be Samir who had stayed in the city of Lys. Faust, who was in Madare, finally stopped the operation of the formation when he saw that Samir had arrived. He spoke in a tired voice. His Majesty's injuries are finally under control. His life has been saved. We can move him into the carriage and escort him back to the palace. In the mountains on the west bank of the Lys River, Prince Benut and his guards had set up a tent. From the looks of it, they were also hunting. The situation in the Kingdom of Babylon was so tense that Princess Sisela had to marry Cynic. Moreover, it was said that King Hammurabi II was seriously ill. How could this prince still have the mood to go hunting? A group of people were sitting in the tent, holding a small hunting feast. The food on the table was the game hunted by the guards in the nearby mountains. However, the people sitting in the tent were the heroes, who had just participated in the assassination of Cynic. Princess Sisela, who was supposed to marry Cynic and become the Empress of Assyria, was among them. A luxurious carriage was parked outside the tent. It was the carriage of Emperor Cynic. Beside it was a handsome white horse. Other than Prince Benut and General Robin, there were 8 other people sitting in the tent. They were Amon Gilgamesh, Princess Sisela, Goliath Madanzo, Walter Rulio and Elmarch. Prince Benut was toasting Goliath. Lord Goliath, you once defeated the Babylon army on the battlefield. But at that time, we lost wholeheartedly. But this time, we never thought that someone of your noble status would personally take the risk to assassinate Cynic. On behalf of the Kingdom of Babylon, I would like to express my gratitude and respect to you. Goliath chuckled. The more distinguished one's status is, the less one can do things. Then the higher one's status is, the more useless one is. An old man like me can't be worshipped every day. I should come out and exercise. Moreover, even a god is involved. How can I just stand by and watch? The assassination of Cynic is not only for the sake of the Hittite kingdom and the Kingdom of Babylon, but more importantly, if this person is still alive, it will be a disaster. Benut and Robin hurriedly got up and bowed to Amon. Thank you, God. We will pray to Marduk and ask him to build a shrine for you in the Kingdom of Babylon to thank you for your kindness. With Amon sitting there, the atmosphere of the hunting feast became a little awkward. Benut and Robin looked a little nervous and uncomfortable because they were sitting together with a god, and this god was not one that the Kingdom of Babylon believed in. Every time the two spoke to Amon, they had to stand up and bow before speaking. They did not dare to remain seated. Amon waved his hand and said, "Just think of me as Amon. I am not sitting here as a god. As for building a shrine for me, there is no need to mention it. I am not a god of the Anunnaki, and the people of the Kingdom of Babylon have not accepted the guidance of my faith. But if you know how to be grateful, I will also be very happy." Gilgamesh interrupted. The Amon of the Empire of Igut? Supreme General Amon of the Empire of Igut? The generals of the armies of all the kingdoms in that chaotic battle were all here. Goliath sighed. The changes in this world are really unpredictable. Even the gods cannot know everything. Prince Benut asked again. Gil, is Cynic really dead? If he is dead, how should we deal with it? Gilgamesh took a sip of wine and replied unhurriedly. I don't know if Cynic is dead or not, but if he is alive, he might as well be dead. As for how you deal with it, it is your own business. I am no longer interested. Goliath reminded. Since Commander Robin is also here, I suggest that the Babylon army be transferred to the front line of the Lys River. After the assassination of Cynic, the Assyrian Empire will inevitably be under the control of Samir, and the Queen will also put a lot of troops on the border. Only when the Kingdom of Babylon shows the courage and strength to fight, will the situation be really reversed. You're tuning in to the Limei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.